share screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that. Okay. And then I'll turn on mute as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So Paul, camera off. Teresa, please share screen.
come to Lagos Business School, you join the community that's made up of not only the staff and employees of Lagos Business School, but everybody who has participated in any program at the Lagos Business School. Our mission is to develop responsible managers for Africa and the world at large. And indeed, the first Chief Executive Program participants of Lagos Business School coined the term the Oasis of Sanity to describe Lagos Business School. And therefore, as part of the community of Lagos Business School, we expect that every member of that community will be focused and committed to ensuring that we develop professional managers for Africa and also that we influence society. And how do we go about influencing society? By all the things that I hope that you have learned or that have been strengthened by your time at Lagos Business School. When you attend any of the programs at Lagos Business School, we make bold to say that in terms of the content, you will get the same as you get in any world-class business school in the world. And we make that promise because we have attained international accreditations from the two topmost accrediting bodies in the world. And we will only get that accreditation if they believe that the quality that we offer is the same as offered in top business schools of the world. But where we're different is that we talk about the peculiarities of doing business in Nigeria and Africa.
What is it about Africa? Some see struggle. We see opportunity. This is where we thrive. Africa is a land of contrasts. Hundreds of millions of our people live without access to clean water and electricity. Yet we have more entrepreneurs than any other continent, and by 2050, half of the world's youth will be African. Africa's been busy. We're urbanizing, embracing technology. We're sprinting forward with some of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's time for African-driven solutions to African problems. It's time to seize the moment and create our own narrative to build the Africa we want. Business has the power to bring about change at scale and make money doing so. The shared value business model reconnects business success with social progress. Shared value is also about partnerships, building business networks that create inclusive growth. The power of collaboration should never be underestimated. If we can bring together businesses and communities from across Africa with a shared purpose, we can build economic value and, most importantly, value for society. It's time for Africa to become the economic powerhouse of the future. Become part of Africa's most powerful shared value business network. Join the Shared Value Africa initiative today.
program started because of the gap we found in the marketplace that NGOs, or non-for-profit organizations, are critical players in the sustainability space because many private sector companies actually make use of the services of NGOs to actualize their sustainability strategy. Unfortunately, we found a lot of skills gap in these organizations in terms of the way they are run, not being very professional. One of the biggest issues is being able to run these businesses and have succession. And succession means getting young people into the space. So the program focuses on training people who are not more than 35 years so that their interests can be enkindled in this and also get them to become the future leaders in the social space.
And in where we now, you also look at your environment. And in looking at your environment, we use what is called PESTA. So when you're looking at your environment, under this external, we call it, so people call it pests. You look at the political environment, how would it change? You look at economic, and then you look at S, social-cultural. What's going on? Are people's attitude changing?
Before I came to LBS, we do a lot, but we're a little bit casual about how we do it because we have our daily jobs. So what we do is to commit the little extra time that we have. With the training I've gone through, I know that there's a lot more that I can do because the more structured and organized the charity is, the bigger the impact, and that's what we are after.
The kind of feedback we've gotten so far shows that they have actually improved in terms of having good organizational structures and processes. Many of them now understand what's expected of them, how they can engage with various stakeholders, how they can render better service to the private sector and their partners.
So prior to coming to the NPLM program in Lagos Business School last year, one of the major problems we had was structure was a bit of problem because this was our first entrepreneurial experience. I'm a co-founder, I have a co-founder as well, and we had not really had this core knowledge of how corporate structure worked, especially for social enterprises. And coming down here, we could see how we could outrightly merge our focus on impact with our focus to be sustainable and make profit, and at the same time create a good structure around that.
I used to think like money was my challenge, so if I could get there and learn how to write for brands and and have more money, it would help. But then I came and it was like somebody was selling my story. Every facilitator who came is as if they x-rayed me, they opened me up and they were showing my challenge. Like, this is what you're doing wrong. This is how you ought to do it.
I want to say a big thank you to Ford Foundation for supporting this program and to Lagos Business School for the quality of the faculty they put together and even the content that we have been able to learn from. I'm sure that going back to my organization, a whole lot of things is going to change. And I'm sure that this program will really bring about significant transformation in the organization that I lead.
The finest quote I've seen is that non-profits think like non-profits. That's the problem. And that really is the problem. So now I'm thinking with a business mind. I'm following my heart to do what my heart wants in terms of making people happy. But then there's a business aspect of it. So we are transiting from an NGO to a social enterprise, because if we look at it as a business, if we work towards a sustainable future, it will be to the advantage of both the beneficiaries and the donors. So sustainability is something that has been ringing in my mind since I came here.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good day, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the day 2 of the Africa Responsible Business Forum. We're so glad to have you join us again today to continue this very important conversation. My name is Oreva Ataya. I am the manager of the Lagos Business School Sustainability Center, and we're very glad to be hosting you today in partnership with the Shared Value Africa Initiative and Rara University School of Business. Today, to guide us through all the proceedings, I'll be handing over now to Tiki Bernard, who's the founder of SVAI, to take us through. Tiki?
Thank you, Ariva, and welcome everybody to, as Ariva said, the second day of the Africa Responsible Business Forum, and hosted, as we know, by the Lagos Business School Sustainability Center and the Shared Value Africa Initiative. I'm really honored to be here today and to speak to all of you, and I want to say again, thank you, Prof. Chris, Dr. Franklin, and Ariva for seeing the value in partnering with the Shared Value Africa Initiative, not only on this initiative, but also in the future. So for those of you that were not with us yesterday, as Ariva said, my name is Tiki Barnard, founder and CEO of the Shared Value Africa Initiative. And the SVAI, as we abbreviate it, is a Pan-African organization that advocates for the adoption and implementation of the shared value business management concept, and we assist businesses to shift their strategy to address societal and environmental issues profitably. So our mantra is profit with purpose, creating economic value and value for society. For those of you that were with us yesterday, you will agree that we had some incredible dialogues. And if you were not with us, make sure that you get the recordings. For me personally, it was a dream come true, listening to the three representatives from the three biggest securities exchanges on our continent, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, talking about sustainable recovery. Thanks again, Jeff, Shamila, Dinode, and Maria for such a really, really incredible discussion. Then on gender parity dialogue, the dialogue hopefully had everybody sitting up yesterday, and Naomi's presentation shared some scary facts. And after yesterday, we all know that gender parity in the workplace is an absolute necessity for Africa's economic recovery. Thanks for your insights, Naomi, Kenzie, Lunga, and Amy. So what are we talking about today? So today is about Day 2 is about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the world's largest trade area that started trading on the 1st of January 2021. We're very blessed to have with us today Silva Ojakol, the Chief of Staff, African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and he's our keynote. After that, we're going to have a panel discussion to talk a little bit more about the African Continental Free Trade Area. And then after that, we are going to step into a little bit of the shared value world, if I can call it that, and talking about strong institutions. We're going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to talk about shared value and responsible business. So all in all, we've got a really great lineup today. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as you did yesterday if you were with us. And if you weren't, I hope you will enjoy it today. So I am going to ask Ariva if Dr. Franklin is with us. Is he, Ariva?
No, we can proceed. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to continue with our program today, and let's step into inviting our keynote for today, Silva Ojakol, Chief of Staff, African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, to share with us insights on how the AFCFTA can be leveraged for sustainable development. As we know, the AFCFTA is Africa's opportunity to build back better during the decade of action. If the trading potential is realized, we will see economic growth and the much needed growth of intra-Africa trade. But let me now ask Silva to please unmute, put on your camera, and please address us. Thank you very much, Silva. So, hello. From the technical team, do we know if Silva is with us?
Yes, he's with us. So I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I think it started trading on the 1st of January while we're waiting for Silva. And really, we touched a little bit on it yesterday, that, and I can't remember if it was Prof. Chris that was saying, it can really change, you know, the Africa landscape forever. You know, if the economic growth that comes with the AFCFTA will really change lives, you know, of our, not only of our young people, of our informal traders, of our traders, and it can really make a difference on the Africa continent.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Tiki. Okay, I would like to just confirm, Mr. Silva, are you ready now? I can see you're on.
Yeah. Maybe his sound's not coming through.
Okay, hello.
Oh, yay.
Great. Hello,
Morning.
Silva.
Hello,
Morning,
can you
Silva.
hear me? Yeah,
Yes,
morning.
Morning
yes,
and welcome.
we can.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but we can't see you yet. We need your
my
camera
apologies. I had to go and present, make an introduction for the presentation of our budget at the African Union Commission. And this is the reason why I have delayed to come into the meeting. But I'm glad that I'm now here, and I hope that our program can continue.
Welcome, Silva. I think we're very, very blessed to have you with us today. Can I just ask you if you could switch your camera on, because we can't see you. We can hear
sure.
you.
I'll do that in a short while.
Okay. So just again, for everybody's purposes, Silva Ujakul, Chief of Staff,
yes,
have joined us now, and there you are. Yay! Thank you very much. Over to you, Silva, and I hope that you got your budget signed off. I hope you got your budget signed off.
Well, I have left my colleagues to continue with the budget presentation, because I told them that I had already this engagement with the Lagos Business School. And so, because we honor very much and we take seriously the capacity building needs for Africa and sharing what is in the AFCFTA. So I had to take this time off to come and be with you here. So my colleagues will continue with the budget.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to you, and we appreciate you making the time. Thank you, Silva.
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, as we begin to open, you asked me to talk about leveraging the agreement that establishes the African Continental Free Trade Area for sustainable development. And in starting, I would like to give a background. And the background that I give is virtually figures, little figures, few figures here and there. We all know that we are 55 member states in the continent, and 54 of these member states have already signed the agreement, and 37 member states have ratified. Now, according to the agreement, when a member state ratifies, then they become a state party. That means now they can actively participate in the trading. The second thing I would like to say by way of background is that our population at the moment is 1.3 billion people in the continent, and it's projected to rise to 2.5 billion by 2050. And that is within our lifetime. It's a few years from now. And of that population, the current population, 60 to 70% are youth, they're young Africans below the age of 35, according to the definition of the African Union Commission. The other thing I would like to say is that at the moment, our GDP, total GDP of Africa, looked at as an economic entity, is 3.4 trillion US dollars. And it's expected to grow by about 3.2% next year, 2022. Now, currently, if you take the GDP and look at the GDP ranking around the world, and you look at Africa as an economic entity, 3.4 trillion puts us at number 5 in terms of the GDP ranking, if we considered Africa as an economic entity, which is what the agreement actually does. The agreement puts Africa as an economic entity, one market, one continental free trade area, which is building towards a customs union. Now, Africa has a vast resource base. In terms of agriculture, there's 874 million hectares of land, arable land in Africa. But current utilization of the arable land is only 274 million, meaning that there is 600 million hectares of land that is either underutilized terribly or not cultivated at all. There is also large reserves of strategic minerals. And to exemplify this, the global supply today of platinum and cobalt, 90% comes from the African continent. 75% of the coltan that is currently supplied to the global market coming from Africa. 67% of manganese, 50% of gold, 35% of uranium, a resource that would be good in terms of generating the energy that is required in the African continent. As you all appreciate, many areas of Africa remain unconnected to the energy sources. And this is not to mention the other resources that are available, diamonds, copper, iron ore, nickel, oil, and other resources which are not mineral-based, such as forestry and fisheries resources. Now, why I outline this background is to say that these are the resources that would form part of what will drive sustainable development agenda in the continent. The agreement that establishes the AfCFTA is probably one of the best instruments that has been crafted for this continent since the attainment of political independence. Before this agreement, we were all looking at ourselves as individual economic entities, or as regions like ECOWAS, maybe like East African Community, like SADC, like COMESA, and so on. But that means that we were largely balkanized small economies that are sometimes uneconomical to operate in if you are a business person. So the agreement ushers in a period of a single trade regime in the continent and brings together these balkanized economies into a single trading regime, into a single investment area, so that an investor that is planning the investment in Lagos knows that the opening is there for them to trade throughout the continent under a preferential trade regime. Now, this certainly creates predictability in the investment and the trade environment. The agreement is crafted for the micro, small, medium enterprises, but also for the large corporations, whether these large corporations are regional or multinational. Why I mentioned the micro, small, and medium enterprises is because they predominate the economic landscape. Up to about 80% in many of our countries are small, medium enterprises that are operating in our economies. Now, in terms of the cross-border trade, their contribution is up to about 40% of our cross-border trade in Africa. Any region is predominated by the small and medium enterprises. And many of them are managed by women and by youth. And this is the segment of the population that we would like to enable and to operate unhindered within the legal instruments that are in the agreement. I always say that the agreement is not just a trade agreement, it is a development instrument because the provisions go beyond trade. The provisions touch on investment. The provisions touch on intellectual property. The provisions touch on competition policy. The provisions touch on digital trade and on industrialization. It is an opportunity to upscale our production, to leverage our innovations. Across the continent, you find young, innovative people, and we need to leverage our innovations to protect the knowledge through the intellectual property protocol, which we hope to be able to conclude by the end of this year, and to add value to the raw materials that I have just enumerated above that are produced in this continent, whether they are agricultural, whether they are forestry, fisheries, minerals, livestock, and livestock products, and so on. So now, in terms of the producing enterprises, they must know now that they are not looking at the small markets in their individual member states. They are looking at a wider African market. Now, value chain development and industrialization are critical pillars for the AfCFTA. For long, as I have said, our resources have been exploited and exported to benefit other regions of the world. We are not saying that we are going to run a closed economy. What we are saying is that we are going to have a mutually beneficial relations with our trade partners in as far as we want to exploit the value chain along our production. The export of raw unprocessed materials makes us lose significant value as we forfeit the downstream processes and the value that comes with those downstream processes. And I'll give an example. Benin, which is just across the border from Lagos, is one of the largest producers of cotton in Africa. Now, when we export that cotton raw with the seed, we lose the first process, which is the ginning process. When we lose the ginning process, we lose the seed. And when we lose the seed, we lose the oil that comes from the seed. We lose the cotton seed cake. That would come after we have processed the seed into oil. We also then lose the fertilizer and we lose the linter. So we lose 5 products. And that means that we lose the value addition along that first chain. That's just the first step in the chain. The second step would have been, we go to spinning and we produce yarn, and then we go to weaving and we produce cloth. And along that value chain, we produce many jobs. We will be able to generate many jobs. The AfCFTA now gives us the opportunity that opens up the regional value chain that we are talking about in the agreement that we have to activate. And the Secretariat is working on some of these. The development of regional value chains and the industrialization may take long. It may take 5 years, maybe 10, maybe more. But what is important at the moment is to start from a few sectors or even subsectors that will have a significant impact on value addition, on employment creation, and on social transformation, meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And some of the sectors, if you like, would be pharmaceutical. We have all seen the ravages that have come with the COVID-19 and the disruption of our supply chains. We relied so much on import of pharmaceutical products from elsewhere, from India, from China, and from other destinations, from other origins. But when the supply chains were disrupted, we found ourselves in a tight supply situation that in some countries rationing, not just for pharmaceuticals, but also for food products started to take place. So pharmaceuticals is a candidate for regional value chains. Textile and garment is the other. I just related the example of the cotton. Agribusiness in terms of production and processing of products, whether they are food products, cocoa, coffee, dairy, and grain. Mineral prospecting, mining, and processing. Automotive industry is the other, and infrastructure in terms of the energy, the ICT, and the rail interconnectivity, as well as the quality infrastructure and standards. Because oftentimes we look at infrastructure only in terms of road, rail, the energy and the interconnectivity of ICT, and we forget the quality aspect, which is the quality infrastructure and standards. That is also critical in terms of enhancing the intra-Africa trade, upscaling the production, that our products then would be able to be traded across the continent unhindered by the quality and the infrastructure standard. There are certainly challenges that we have seen and that we know that we will have in terms of the implementation of the FCFTA. And the infrastructure is one of those that I have pointed out already, but it's also an opportunity for the investment community to look at the infrastructure challenges as an opportunity to create value out of the AFCFTA. And I know that the financial institutions are already looking at putting aside funding for infrastructure development across the continent so that the West can connect to the East, the North can connect to the South, the Northwest can connect to the Southeast, and so on and so forth. So there is the other challenge of the geopolitics. There are people who don't believe that it can be done, that you can leverage the FCFTA to benefit the continent. Now that geopolitics is a very complex situation, and unless you understand it, we will not be able to overcome. But we got to understand and we got to remain united and remain focused as a continent towards the ideal that the AFCFTA is looking at. Because the AFCFTA is not just a trade, as I said, it's a development instrument. It is crafted as one of those pillars that would meet the objectives of the Agenda 2063 of the Africa that we want, an Africa that is prosperous, that is development, that creates jobs and opportunities for its people, that improves the living conditions in Africa, that we shall stop being called the bottom billion, that we shall also come up and call ourselves the middle billion or the top billion with time to come. We, however, know that at least those who are doubting that we can do it, we know that from the studies that have been carried out by the UN Economic Commission for Africa, but also by the World Bank, that when we successfully, and I'm not saying if, I'm saying when we successfully implement, because I know we're going to do it, when we successfully implement the FCFTA, we will have lifted 100 million people out of poverty. 30 million of those will be lifting from absolute poverty. 68 million from moderate poverty. That's a population of about 100 million people when we successfully implement the agreement. We also know that by 2035, we'll have added 450 billion US dollars onto the African trade portfolio, because we are adding about 35 billion per annum, looking at our growth trajectory. Now, not only are we going to do that, but we are also going to trade better and more with the rest of the world. Once we begin to develop our regional value chains, we upscale our production, we are able then to add value to our products. We are then able to increase to better our terms of trade, that we will not forever be suffering from the cyclical and the regular vagaries that we face in the international market in terms of price fluctuations that usually affect the primary product. So in our effort to chart a trade and investment road for the development of Africa, so we must remain focused. We must be able to look at the purpose. Now at the Secretariat, what we are doing at the moment following the launch of the trade is to ensure the harmonization of customs operations and border agency cooperation. Across the borders, you have the immigration, you have the customs, you have the standards bodies, you have the agricultural inspection agencies, and so on. So we are harmonizing their operations across the borders. We have a program which we have drawn up for the harmonization of SPS measures, sanitary and phytosanitary, to enable our agricultural trade across the continent, but also to address the technical barriers to trade and conformity assessment frameworks and procedures for conforming to the standards. And I know that I have a colleague that was previously in ASO, the Africa Regional Standards Organization. She may have a couple of things to say about that. We are moving towards the capacity building in trade policy, such as in trade remedies, to address the challenges that some of the countries may be having. We are also building capacity on dispute settlement and trade facilitation. We are coordinating the establishment of a vibrant Pan-African private sector apex body, which we would like to call the Africa Business Forum. We coordinating the monitoring and elimination of the non-tariff barriers to trade. We have drawn up a program to support the small and medium enterprises in their production processes, but also in cross-border trade. And as I said earlier, these are mainly managed by the women and the youth, and we are supporting the state parties in terms of implementation of their commitment. Beyond this, we know that there needs to be an adjustment as the economies undergo structural adjustment. There will always be challenges. Working with partners like Afri-Exim Bank, we developed the adjustment fund to address the challenges that may arise. But we also, the adjustment fund has about 3 tracks. One, to address the revenue challenges, revenue shortfalls that may arise out of liberalization program, but also there is a fund to help the member states to upgrade their infrastructure. Now, what might be the national or regional priorities? And this is really something that we just suggest from the point of view of the Secretariat, is to develop what we call an AFCFTA response strategies. That is the responsibility of the member states, but also of the regional economic communities, to develop responsive strategies to the exploitation of the opportunities that arise out of the AFCFTA. In developing those, they may wish to look at their priority sectors in terms of the comparative advantage, but also in terms of the competitive advantage. They may also wish then to look at their priority markets within the African continent and to identify challenges that they need to address in terms of investment and so on, and to increase and to improve their investment and trade supportive infrastructure, and develop programs that would support the private sector to upscale their production processes and align their processes and procedures to the AFCFTA implementation, strengthen trade and trade facilitating institutions for the AFCFTA implementation. Now, in terms of the private sector, what we would suggest for the private sector to do is to upscale their productive capacities through upgrade of the production systems and equipment for efficiency gains along the production chain. Now, and to look at a broader African market and stop looking at ourselves from the national perspective, look at ourselves from the broader regional perspective, but now more importantly, from the continental perspective. Capacity and skills development in order to improve productivity, and the mobilization of resources for investment, and then make deliberate efforts towards joint venture arrangements with partners within the African continent, but also outside the African continent, in order to be able to upscale, to raise resources, but to upscale our production and be able to gain efficiency along the production chain. Now, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that the AFCFTA sets the stage for Africa to trade with itself in a more predictable regime. It also prepares us to trade more meaningfully with the rest of the world when we move fully to embrace value addition. We should all be able to embrace this instrument. And I call upon colleagues, the young Africans from the Lagos Business School, to embrace this instrument and exploit the opportunities it opens in our continent. Having said these few remarks, I would like to say thank you very much, and I'm very sorry for taking such a long time in delivering these remarks. Thank you. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Silver. I don't think you have to apologize for anything because you've given us so much information. And I think when we look at this, we as the private sector have to ask ourselves, what is our responsibility in all of this? And there's so many areas that you've touched on. The upgrade of our production facilities, infrastructure development. If we look at our value chain development, if we look at our uplifting our SMEs and our SMMEs, there is so much opportunity for us as the private sector to really step up and also, support the AFCFTA, which I'm sure we're all gonna do, because there will always be challenges. As you said, we need to work together and overcome them, because what is more important than lifting 100 million people out of poverty? And that's a good enough reason to implement the AFCFTA successfully. So on that note, I want to say thank you very much, Silver, for making the time to be with us today. And what we are going to do now is to continue with our program. We have a discussion, which you're welcome to join us if you've got the time. I don't know if you have the time, but we are going into a panel discussion now, talking about leveraging the Africa Continental Free Trade Area for sustainable development. Same topic that you had, but just sort of listening to it from a private sector perspective as well. So thank you very much, Silver. Really appreciate your time. And I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Adun Okupe from the Lagos Business School. She's from the Faculty of Sustainability and Strategy. And joining Adun are three handpicked experts, shall I call them, on the AFCFTA and members of our shared value community. So Dr. Adun, are you there?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm here. Thanks, Tiki.
Thank you, Adun. You can continue.
Right, okay, so good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Silver, for that beautiful, insightful introduction. I think we will all agree that it provided a very strong platform that we can, foundation that we can use to build up our conversation for the rest of, I think we have about an hour left. So joining us today, our session is titled Leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Agreement for Sustainable Development. And with me, I have panelists that are going to share from their wealth of experience. You'll agree with me once I go through their bios that this is a stellar stellar panel session with different views that will hopefully give us a wide-ranging but also quite specific insight into how to leverage the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, particularly from what Silver said. You know, he mentioned some very good points looking at how do we know how to be united as a continent. We have different government systems. That was a very powerful question that was asked. And how do we then leverage the AFTA agreement, and how do we overcome the varying systems, rules, and regulations? So basically more about harmonization as well. And perhaps also seeing how we can learn from other economies that have tried to have continent-wide agreements for trade, but also for business development and sustainable development. So very quickly, we have Beatrice Gakuba, who is a food security and nutrition expert. She's a senior content advisor in agribusiness, social innovation, and she has a long career in poverty alleviation and integrated development with various United Nations agencies and other development agencies. She started one of Rwanda's most thriving business in horticulture, and she was also appointed in 2005 as the chairperson of the board of Rwanda Air, making her the first African woman to have that position. So welcome to our session this morning, Beatrice.
Thank you very much, Adun. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the Lagos Business School for inviting us. And I'm very happy that from yesterday and today, you really respected the gender balance, and really it's good to see that the opinions are going to be shared between the gender, and this is actually the way forward. I thank you very much. And also I want to thank Shared Value, Take Care, who have been, interacting, and who also invited me on this. So I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. Teresa, can you please stop sharing your screen so that we can see the panelists when they come up? Thank you. Right, the next panelist is Dr. Eve Godzikwa. Eve is the past president of African Organization for Standardization, headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, and she was the president from 2016 to 2019. As the champion for Eastern and Southern Africa, and also the chairman of the Africa Standardization Strategy and Roadmap for Africa's fourth industrial revolution, she was responsible for ensuring that global best practices, business excellence, and standardization were spearheaded within the AU Continental Standardization, but also looking at how we can develop these across countries under the AFTA single market. So this answers some of the questions that, some of the comment about that Bronson mentioned in terms of harmonizing across the continent. So I think Eve will answer that question after our session. And finally, last but not the least, John B. Eve. So Eve, good morning and welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dunn, and it's wonderful to be part of the third edition of the Africa Responsible Business Forum. I'm excited to be here. And also thank you very much to Lagos Business School and Africa Shared Value for putting together such a wonderful forum. I believe a lot of issues have been raised yesterday in yesterday's meeting in terms of leveraging and just how we can tackle some of the opportunities and challenges that are before us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eve, Dr. Eve. And John B., like I said, last but not the least, he is an AFTA and shared value interface expert. And until recently, he was the public affairs manager at Nestle's global headquarters. For the past 5 years, he was regulatory and scientific affairs regional head for Nestle in sub-Saharan Africa, where he coordinated regulatory and advocacy strategies across 48 countries and led engagement with the regional and Pan-African institutions. John was also previously the communications manager at the company's Swiss headquarters, and that's where he worked producing Nestle's quite popular creating shared value reports together with accompanying global communication programs over a 10-year period. And prior to his career at Nestle, he was the worldwide internal comms manager at Novartis and internet Knowledge Management Director at HR Solutions Provider Adecco. He's fluent in French and German, and he's a graduate of the University of London. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Adun. Thank you, Professor Chris, Dr. Franklin, Dr. Areva, and of course, Jackie, for this wonderful opportunity. And well, if yesterday is anything to go by, and you know, Silva's really inspirational introduction there, I think we're in for an interesting ride this afternoon and this morning. So thank you once again.
Indeed, we are. So to our participants, if you have questions or comments, please, you can drop them in the chat box. What will happen now is that we'll have our panel session, and then for about 30 minutes, and then, or maybe 25 minutes, I'm looking at the time now, and thereafterwards, we will then be able to open the floor up to questions from the participants, and then I'll come back to the panelists to answer them. If you would like a particular panelist to answer your question, then you would need to also specify that so I can point it directly to them. So without much ado, I would like to invite my panelists. I'll start with Beatrice, actually. Could you just share a little bit for us about when you think about the after, right? And when you're trying to connect this with what you're doing in agribusiness, really, what are the moves that you're trying to make to ensure that this contributes to some sort of sustainable development on the continent? So basically, how can after contribute to sustainable development? Just very, very high level response. Thanks.
Thank you, Adun. I think, first of all, I want to, you know, we talk about with a lot of criticism about our African Union, our leaders. I think that the first thing we have to do here to acknowledge that at least we got this going, and this agreement is there and it's a reality. And it's the biggest market for us and the biggest opportunities for everyone and every business on the continent.
Sorry to interrupt you, Beatrice. I can't see your face. Is it possible to switch on your video?
I have switched on my video, but I don't know what's happening. It's not on.
Showing John's details, right? Okay. Anyway, please go on.
Yes. So it's an opportunity, and in business, obviously, everyone talked about the challenges of Africa Free Trade Agreement, but for businesses, we see it as an opportunity, many opportunities. The playing field is huge, and the opportunities also are. But for women, again, and I really want to pick up for what the session of yesterday addressed very well. For women and youth, we're very worried about the way we are addressing the opportunities. Maybe we'll not have the equal opportunities for that big market for us. We have to think about how first do we finance the incomplete value chains, because we have a lot of complete value chains when it comes to agribusiness. And we also know that in agriculture, 80% of the rural population living in Africa, 80% of the Africans live in the rural setting, and 80% of the labor in agriculture also are women. So if we do not intentionally and deliberately set up a program in finance and in training and capacity building to prepare the women and the youth to access that market, it's going to be a challenge. I'll come back to also the fragility of supply chain. I think all of us have seen that what COVID has highlighted was the fragility of our supply chains. During the lockdowns, we could not. Okay, sorry. I don't have to ask to put my video. I think I just replied to the host. So I don't know if my video is on.
No, it's not. We can see it's just a black screen. So perhaps there's a Zoom setting that you need to. So what I'll do is I'll let you finish, and then whilst John and Eve are providing their own responses, perhaps you can work with Teresa on that. So
all right. Okay, so I'm coming. I talked about how we finance the incomplete value chains. When you take any value chain in the agri sector, they are incomplete. And so how do we finance that? But even that, how do we train the women to understand the value of those value chains? And the fragility of supply chain is very important. The logistics, obviously, after with the lockdown, we saw how the continent was very fragile. We have no cargo facilities. We have no freighters between our continent. Even for when the passengers flight stopped, cargo, we realized that most of the cargo between African countries was just being transported in the belly of the passengers plane. So we have to revisit that. And this requires a lot of political will from our governments and our leaders, a lot of commitment, a lot of investment in the infrastructure, and whether it be air, sea, or road. And those are the tools that are going to make the Africa Free Trade Area work. And at the One Africa, we want to make sure that the women are part of all that. Yeah, as we speak now, there's a disproportion between the contribution of the women in the African economy and the value that is given to that. I think the colleagues who spoke yesterday highlighted that. And I want to pick up what Shamila said yesterday. We need a good plan, and we need to start now in the agriculture sector, because with that improvement and the transformation of our agriculture sector, there will be very little that our countries will be taking advantage of that free area trade agreement. I stop there.
Right, okay. Thank you, Beatrice, for sharing with us and talking particularly about the fragility of the supply chain. I know Silva had mentioned something about that earlier today, and we will also be coming back to that, because it's one thing to have an agreement. We have had several agreements in Africa, in West Africa. It's about also ensuring that these agreements also then lead to the impact that they're supposed to. So Eve, very quickly, can you share just very high level what AFTA means to you and how we can ensure it contributes to sustainable development, particularly with a lot of the work that you're doing in terms of standardization and harmonization?
Thanks very much, Adan. So from where I'm sitting, in terms of Africa, and if we are to leverage the AfCFTA for sustainable development, we need to understand what are some of the challenges and some of the solutions that we can proffer. And especially given that we are coming out of COVID, and the reality of it is that due to COVID, there are some dynamics that we have to specifically deal with. So as we have already heard from Silva, trading did start on the 1st of January, in terms of goods and services. But now, the beginning of trade amongst the African countries under the AfCFTA agreement essentially requires the continent to reposition Africa to trade with itself in a more transparent manner. This requires more attention to harmonization of standards, also attention to issues around the technical regulations, conformity assessment regimes, in order to achieve a level of resilience and long-term value and growth. Now, looking at the issues around transparency, transparency is actually a core principle of the world trading system under the WTO. And the member states, the African member states, are signatories to the WTO, meaning that we have to work around the issues around transparency, which is a key principle. And when we talk about transparency, what are we talking about? We're talking about the issue of notifications, because there are challenges that will arise, which will need to be notified through the WTO. Also, the issues around establishing inquiry points at national level, and also around the issue of publication requirements. So basically, I think at a very high level, what are we saying? We are saying that there's need for us to recognize that non-discriminatory trade is required as a minimum. And also to date, very little information is actually flowing to the WTO. So I think more work needs to be done, especially with regards to the private sector, and also recognizing the issue around the SMMEs as well. And just to mention that, ASO is actually an observer member of WTO. So there are efforts to ensure that under ASO, the necessary structure is put in place through the member states to enable them to be able to have a functional and efficient notification center, or I'll say inquiry point at the national standards bodies. And I would also invite members who are logged on here today to visit the ASO African Trade web portal to get more information. But essentially, I think at a very high level, I would say transparency is quite an essential ingredient in terms of ensuring that the African trade, free trade area, is implemented efficiently to enhance the issues around clarity, predictability, and trust. Because without trust, you cannot trade. And I think that will require more coordination at national level, more coordination even at regional level, and also at continental level to enhance the issues around transparency. And preparedness is also a very key ingredient, because I recognize that a number of African countries are just starting to understand what FTA is all about, and also trying to unpack the realities under the FTA. And also governments will also need to raise the profile of the FTA at the national inquiry point level for the nationals, for the local people to understand what it all means, and also recognizing that we have SMEs to deal with at the same time.
All right, thanks a lot, Eve, for that. And I think the important thing is showing that there needs to be a lot of work within country. And then when we then look at regionally, so within the sub-regions on the continent, before we then start to see how we can then make it work within the continent. I have some thoughts on that, because we see that sometimes within country even, it's very difficult for things to work. And so the question then remains, how do we, using this agreement, how do we try to solve or address some of the challenges that we have, particularly with infrastructure development and value addition, and then also then how do we ensure that the routes, the trade routes are quite seamless in how they operate and function. Okay, so John, it'll be good for you to share with us, just from your own perspective and your own experience working, in on the continent, in PR, in public relations, but also in comms. What do you think we need to do to achieve sustainable development with this free trade agreement?
Okay, well, I think that a couple of the speakers have referred to the importance of addressing non-tariff barriers. I think that many commentators that I've been following are saying that the reduction of tariffs is going to be the easy bit. And it's actually going to be the eradication of non-tariff barriers that is really going to make the difference in that 450 billion additional income to the African economies that Silva was talking about earlier. I think that if we give a specific example, even within current regional economic communities where treaties should exist, there is no mutual recognition where it actually should be in place. Let me give you a practical example. If you want to, and this is coming from my Nestle experience, if you want to register, you want to have permission to sell powdered milk in Kenya, for example, you register with the authorities in that country. Under the terms of the East African community, you should be able to sell that product in Tanzania, but you can't. Also, Kenya is a member state of COMESA, but the Ethiopian process is way different to gain approval. So I think if one needs to be really committed to addressing some of those barriers that exist that shouldn't already, if we want to move ahead. And then I think that it's going to be really important to also recognise the role of COVID in addressing, of AFTA in addressing some of the societal problems that existed pre-COVID and which have been exacerbated by it. And let me reference the Akin Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, who wrote in the FT the other day about the fact that as COVID affects the African continent, so the nutrition insecurity challenges that pre-existed the pandemic have remained unaddressed, and if anything have got worse. So as we think about our COVID regeneration strategies, we also need to think about how to use the momentum that AFTA provides to help us emerge smarter and better. And I'm put in mind in that respect of some of the comments around food loss and waste yesterday, because I think there's a triple burden. We talked about quick having smart and effective and workable solutions, and we talked about having them now. Well, I think coming back to working on bringing together some of the things that both Silva and Eve were saying about quality infrastructure could actually help us address the food loss and waste, which we explored yesterday, are a major issue in especially sub-Saharan Africa, but not elsewhere in the continent as well. If we invest in the infrastructure, both in terms of storage and transportation, to obviate food loss, in particular post-harvest loss, and address contamination, and we invest in the infrastructure to test for conformity and safety. At the same time, we address the public health problem of unsafe food on the continent. We give opportunities to trade beyond borders because we're sure about the quality standards. And in the same time, if we reduce food loss, we at the same time address carbon emissions, because food loss and waste is, I think, is either the third or the fourth biggest emitter globally, and certainly agriculture is the biggest source of emissions on the African continent. So I'll stop there for the moment, but just to spark some ideas on how AFTA and how enhancing trade between African countries by addressing non-tariff barriers can have multiple benefits, not just in addressing food and nutrition insecurity, but addressing trade and additional income opportunities within and beyond the continent. And thirdly, addressing some of the sustainability challenges that face the continent.
Right, thank you, John. And participants, I hope that my three panelists have been able to provide some sort of background from different areas. So from the agribusiness supply chain point of view to the standardization and how this works within the World Trade Organization, but also within the free trade agreement, and seeing how we can make it work institutionally within country, within region, and then within continent. And John has also then shared some perspectives for us on how we can ensure that we're able to understand that these issues there's some granular perspectives or dimensions to them that we also need to address. Now, for me, the challenge is ensuring that we can do this, but hopefully, as we go deep down into the questions now, you'll be able to get some perspective and some insight into how, as a business, as an organization, as an SME or an NGO, or even a government parastatal, you can also key into the success of the free trade agreement. So I've been told that our session has been extended by 10 minutes because we started a few minutes later. So thank you so much. But I'm also looking at the time. And what I would like to do is that some questions are coming up within the chat platform and comments as well. Please keep them going, keep them coming. And then I would encourage my speakers, once you're not speaking, if you can try and address some of the questions that have been directed to you, just so that we have enough time and we're not rushing at the end, and we give everyone the opportunity to have their questions answered. So, John, I'm coming back to you actually, because the question that I have is first directed to you. COVID-19, we've spoken about how COVID-19 has really affected the world really, but also looking at how this came into action, the AFTA agreement came into action 1st of January 2021. This is, it's good, it's positive, but then how do we ensure that we're prepared, particularly with some of the issues with the supply chain, etc. But not only even that, how do we ensure that we're able to, manage or mitigate some of the effects COVID-19 has had on the success of the free trade agreement? Thanks
again. I would refer back to what I said a little bit earlier. I think it was a bit premature with some of my comments, but we're seeing commentators like PwC in Nigeria in a recent report saying the expectations of enhanced intra-African trade are being hampered by COVID-related challenges such as border closure, travel bans, nationalism and uncertainty in tariffs and exchange rates. But they also, again, turn the question a little bit on its head and say the key question that comes to mind is how can African Continental Free Trade Area provide economic opportunities post-COVID to accelerate industrialization in Africa? And then the UN University says that African Continental Free Trade Area should be accelerated rather than delayed to negate the current crisis and boost inter-African trade. Local innovative knowledge and technologies should be leveraged to address the continent's current vulnerabilities caused by COVID. The crisis demands heightened African integration rather than isolation. And I think what that tells us is that there was a degree of fragility within African economies that made many of them a little bit less resilient to the impacts of COVID. And I would say again that there are some very obvious ways of building back better that address some of those underlying societal factors. And I would refer back to the example again of addressing food loss and waste as a way of simultaneously addressing nutrition insecurity, of increasing trade by enhancing and formalizing standards, mutual recognition and harmonization, and then also at the same time of addressing emissions challenges.
Thank you, John. I'll wrap up once I finish this round. I'll summarize once I finish this round, just because of time. And so I'm going to come to you now, Eve, in terms of some of the challenges of the implementation, and particularly two things: what can governments do to overcome these challenges, and what can businesses do as well? And this is within the backdrop that the free trade agreement is not new. We've had quite a few agreements on the continent. We have quite a few areas, trade areas, etc. Sometimes, a lot of the times, they haven't really worked as they ought to. So how do we ensure that this doesn't happen this time around?
Thanks, Jordan. I guess from my assessment, what I'm seeing here is, I think, this whole situation that we have with COVID has given us a very good opportunity to evaluate issues relating to, what needs to be done and what can be done. What are the possibilities around, the after. And one of the things that I think we need to be able to do is to be able to try and start unpacking. I mentioned the issue of awareness. Awareness is still at an all-time low in terms of, the FTA. At a national level, I think we need more engagement between the private sector and the government, and I would say all the stakeholders, actually, and also to be more inclusive. Making sure that we also involve people on the ground, the SMEs, because these are the people who are actually working on the ground. So I think more engagement is required, more awareness, capacity building, because for people who have been involved in standardization at national level, regional and international, we are very much aware of how technical these areas can be, especially from the standards point of view. When you start talking about standards, technical regulations, and conformity assessment issues, the testing, it is very complex for the ordinary person. So I think there's need for more engagement, more, just to unpack everything. And then, as I mentioned, at national level, the national quality infrastructures, I think we're dealing with, already we heard that there are 54 countries that have signed up to the free trade area, and 34 have already ratified, meaning that all of these countries now, they are now state parties to the FTA. And what they need to do is to be able to create the necessary national quality infrastructure to support the FTA at national level. And then I mentioned the inquiry points. The inquiry points are important. Normally they are at the national standards body level. These need to be capacitated to be able to answer the questions.
I think we lost Eve. Can you still hear her, Adun?
Yes, I can hear Eve clearly, so yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Tiki, if you can't hear me. Thanks, Edwin, for confirming. So I was just mentioning that in relation to the national inquiry point for standards and conformity assessment, these conformity assessment issues must be unpacked at the national standards body level. So there's need for capacity building. So I think there is a lot that we can do at national level. And I mentioned the issue of preparedness. We are not prepared. Trading started on the 1st of January, but to be honest, most countries right now are not prepared under the FTA. Firstly, they haven't understood what it is, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are. We don't have the national quality infrastructure. We're talking about countries who are still trying to grapple with the issues around harmonization of standards, because basically what we're saying is to be able to trade across these countries, it's one standard accepted everywhere. That's the concept that we're trying to promote. But you cannot have one standard accepted everywhere when your infrastructures are all different. You don't have a unified conformity assessment regime. So these are real practical issues, I think, that we all need to deal with to be able to start benefiting from the FTA. A lot needs to be done. And I think governments as well to support at I think a lot can be done to bring the stakeholders together, including people like us, the technical people, the private sector, technical regulators, bring us together into one house and, just allow us to ventilate what this FTA means so that we can take a full advantage of the opportunities. And as you have heard, this is a huge market, potentially 1.3 billion people, but it's going to grow to 2.5 billion people. And in terms of the value, you can see the value is huge. We're looking at a huge value, $3.4 trillion today, and with an expectation of growth of 2%. So I think there's a lot that we can do, and we need to see the opportunity that is right at our doorstep. I think it's the biggest single market that's going to be registered under the WTO. So there's need for more awareness, more capacity building, more unpacking, more coordination, and just helping us understand what it all means.
Right. Thank you so much, Eve, for that. And even, what you're saying about awareness creation, particularly how do we distill this so that it's of relevance to SMEs is an important task. And I'll come back to you, John, later on about this, because you're the comms expert, right? So it's that sense of how do we ensure that there's a comms strategy even around this so that people understand what the opportunities are. And just very quickly, I'll refer, I remember we did a project, I focused primarily on the creative and tourism sectors. And we did a project talking about this with the creative sector agents. And many people, this was last year, a lot of people were not even aware that this agreement was being signed or that they could even key into this. So what this is showing is that even within sectors, across sectors, it's important that we start to look at this and reflect and say, how can this agreement affect different sectors and how can people really benefit from this, in terms of creating multiple marketplaces, because really that's what we're trying to do here. If you're having a free trade agreement, then you're trying to also see how we can create marketplaces that will benefit the value creation and value addition that we want to take place on the continent. Okay, Beatrice, I hope the video is working now. I'm coming back to you. And just to talk about the fact that the trade on the continent is mostly informal, and that's one of also the challenges. So if you have SMEs, primarily micro and small businesses, and most of these are informal businesses and usually carried out by women, can you reflect a bit on what that will mean, on what that can mean? And then if we're then talking about moving things to digitization, because that will also help in terms of the standardization and harmonization, how can we ensure that this is able to enhance the work or the businesses that is already being done by these women and men as well in the informal sector in Africa?
Thank you, Adon. I think my video has not been solved yet, so I think I will just continue. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I really want to this is a very interesting subject because as where I sit, at the African Women Business Network, we have 3,000 former registered across 43 African countries.
Right, Beatrice, you've kind of gone a bit quiet, so can you just start again? Right, I can't hear Beatrice. Beatrice? Tiki, can you hear Beatrice?
I can't hear her either. So I guess she's having network challenge.
Okay, so we'll just move ahead and we'll come back to her just because I think it'll be important, particularly in her work with women, for her to talk about what they're trying to do. So thanks, Teresa, for confirming this. So I'll just move ahead quickly to the next question that I have. And when Beatrice comes back, we can then go back to her. So John, 2 questions. The first one is the comms part of things. How do we ensure that more people are aware of really what's going on and how they can benefit from this? And then the second question is that this comms needs to also include how people can collaborate. So how do we overcome the lack of collaboration that we find within African countries, and particularly not just from a government perspective, but really from a practitioner and business perspective?
I don't know. I'm glad you asked me both of those together because I think you're quite right. They're absolutely interlinked. And the question of overcoming lack of cooperation between African countries is going to be fundamental to the success of AFTA. I've seen some comments coming up and questions on the chat about, how do we get to the situation where you have this lack of awareness? And it is, yes, quite concerning, but we do have the opportunity to deal with it going forward. But the question about overcoming lack of cooperation is fundamental to the success of the Continental Free Trade Area. Now, if I may be permitted to make a parallel with the European Union as a borderless trading bloc, its success relies in part on its attitude to subsidiarity. Directives in the EU are commonly applied to all member states who by and large abide by them. And it seems more often than not that the sovereignty of subsidiarity in the African context is kind of given as an excuse. And coming to the communications question, I think that you have to do something before you communicate. You have to provide proof, because if you provide proof of the effectiveness of the concept, that works on both the government and the practitioner level. So I think that one of the triggers could be for the regional economic communities and the international organizations, especially AUDTI and or UNECA, to carry out research that demonstrates the short, medium and long-term benefits of taking a regional perspective rather than a national one. How, for example, could situations such as that arose between Nigeria and Benin just before the operation, before the bringing into effect of the Continental Free Trade Area have been better managed or avoided? What are the benefits over time to both countries of closer cooperation? And there are other contexts in which this sort of research could provide solutions and answers to some of the concerns, the very legitimate concerns of, let's say, for example, landlocked economies. How is this situation, how is the liberalization of trade going to benefit them over time by freeing up some of these non-tariff barriers? And then once you've got that proof, once you've got the buy-in, then you can start to communicate. And I think again that would need to be a regionally and even continentally funded systematic campaign that features real life stories of people who have benefited from this, because that is, in my opinion, the best way to show, rather than a fairly conceptual idea for many of the actual operators on the ground. I think if you show real life examples of success. And you're going to need to put significant resources behind getting the message out there. But using both, if I may say, traditional and social media channels, I think that would, be at least a start. But I'd also like to touch on the idea that's been coming through as well about, business community needs to step up and have its voice be heard. Because again, if I think about other regions of the world, if I think about the European Union, Asia Pac, the United States, all of those regions, they have business representative organizations, not just generalist ones, but ones that represent the needs and concerns of specific sectors. And very often those are officially accredited as partners of national and regional governments. And so their voice is statutorily heard in policy debate. And yes, we have some effective business councils on the continent. I like to refer to Namdi, I think it was, who mentioned in the chat about the complexity of the different regional economic communities. And I do think that is an issue. And also when you look at the fact that some business councils are very effective, and they've understood, for example, the risks posed by non-tariff barriers, and they're effectively attempting to address those. But others are quite a long way behind that, and I think the business community needs to, if you will, hold the RECs accountable, to have them represented, have their voice represented, and have platforms that are statutorily enabled to contribute to the policy enhancement debate and in identifying the new policies that need to be made. There are, transactional mechanisms, again, going back to one of the other comments on the chat, that are designed like the non-tariff barrier reporting tools. That will help any operator of any size report a non-tariff barrier violation when they're trying to export between member states. What it doesn't do is systematically contribute into the changes of policy that are likely to be necessary to address those barriers. So I'll stop there for the moment, but I think business representation and calling for business to be systematically represented, heard and included in the policy discussion, for me, that's one of the pieces that's very patchy at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. I'll have to agree with you, John, because again, it's also about ensuring that businesses within sector understand what are the specific opportunities and specifically how they can apply these opportunities for their business. Sometimes when something is done on a continent-wide basis, it almost seems nebulous, because how do you then grasp hold of it, and what do you do about it? So this is work for us. This is more work. And I think that's partly what these sessions are about. It's to tease some of the underlying issues and some of what we need to address. And then hopefully each and every one of us here, about 125 participants, can then take from it and say, right, how do I apply this in my sector? How do I apply this? How do I collaborate with other people? How do I start to lobby government for what you said, some sort of statutory recognition? And then how do we start becoming voices? But particularly as well, how do we identify other people within other countries on the continent that are doing something similar? And then really start to say, at a continent level, this is what this sector needs. At this at this sector level, this is what we need, so that it makes it a little bit more manageable, as opposed to this overwhelming, overarching agreement. And we want to benefit from 3.4 trillion. It's like, what does that mean?
A little bit too big to handle, right?
Yeah.
Break it down a bit.
Yes, exactly. So breaking it down a bit. So Beatrice, I'm happy your video is working. I'm very happy it's working now. And what I'll do, because I've also just looked at the time, is that I had two questions for you, and I think it will be good if I collapse them together. So it's basically talking about informal sector, talking about women, talking about digital, and then talking about SMEs, so even beyond women. So it's really, I hope you've gotten that. So talking about the informal sector, talking about how, what you're doing with women to benefit from this, and then talking about how they can also benefit from the digitization of trade that is happening on the continent. And finally, a reflection on SMEs in general, so for men and women. Okay, I can't hear you, so I think your audio needs to be connected. Isn't this amazing with technology? First of all, we could hear her but couldn't see her. Now we can see her but we can't hear. Can't hear you.
Now you can hear me, right?
Perfect. So please go ahead. But I think you need to move your camera a little bit so we see more of your face. Perfect. Thank you. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yes.
So yes, I will speak 90% about women, and then the.
Oh, it's going on and off. I can hear you faintly, but if you speak, so you're going to speak 90% about the women and then give men 10%. Goodness. Wow. Not very well. Just bear with us a few minutes. Beatrice,
Can you hear me now?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, so now SMEs first. I speak about SMEs. As I said, as a One Africa, we're enabler and facilitators for the trade and market access. So I'll start with market access. And before we speak at the bigger Africa free trade area, let's start with the regional, even local market. Our women SMEs, even before COVID, had a lot of problems, understanding how the local market works. So if you cannot understand how the local market works, then it's very difficult even to go beyond even the region. When you come to regional blocks, we have a lot of informal. Then as you ask me, I'm combining everything. The informal sector, most of our cross-border trade is made by women, and it's informal. And the non-tariff barriers are very different for men and for women. Because when our young women from any border post of the continent try to cross the border, they ask many questions. Because of there's so many officers at the border post. Yeah, and most of them are men. So the way they look at a young woman trying to cross with their goods is not the same way that they look at the men. So there is a lot of harassment also that goes on for our women traders. And COVID came now to make it really worse because, the borders were closed and the requirements and the harassment and the NTB became even more and more. And also it highlighted the lack of information as I speak also, the information gap. I think Eve mentioned that. Even with the East African community or ECOWAS, because we have members across the continent, even the officers at the border post, they don't even know about those agreements. So they keep on asking tasks and other things that things are supposed to be free. Yeah, so let's not even talk about the Africa Free Trade Areas. And I think what is going to be interesting here is how do we build capacity for all those people who are facilitators or who are, facilitating the border posts, the airports and everything to understand that here, this is, as Eve was saying, unpack it for everyone, from the government, from the ministries, from the officers at the border trade, and of course for women, because that is what we have been witnessing. That's the lesson that we have learned from the trading blocks already. So COVID came. We did an impact assessment study on the impact of COVID on our women, 3,000 women SMEs across the continent. And only 4% had adapted to digital marketing and social media marketing. So that came as an additional gap that we are already facing as women in terms of accessing finance, accessing market, being able to trade. Eve talked about standards. Our women don't even know what are the standards required to trade, for each value chain. So there is a lot of capacity building that we're talking about. Yeah, for our women SMEs. And we really have to focus on that because those are the 80% of the trading that takes place on the continent. So I will not emphasize more, than that, because that's what the big, organization like ours that are advocating and promoting and facilitating those women, we keep on saying. And when I agree with John when he says that private sector has to come and step in, but we also need the women to be part of all those policy decision making. And here I'm talking to Africa Free Trade Area. They have to have a special window for women because we are lagging behind in any information you can have on any trading block, anything that has to do with trade and access to market on the continent. We are lagging behind. So we need to accelerate. We need to facilitate. We need to unpack for those women. And we also need to really track the changes, you know, how is this happening? How are we? And that's where the universities like the Lagos Business School and the others really will have to do the research. How do we track? What are the indicators? What do we use? How do we monitor the changes? Yeah, to reduce those gaps. And we need transformative solutions, and we have them, but we need to be listened to. We need to be we need to be at the table. We need to voice, and we need to be there because it is really very important. And we really have to. And I'm happy that the Africa Free Trade Area gentleman was here. We need really bold and intentional and deliberate, yeah, change. And how do we look at women and agriculture? Those are the two ingredients for the women and agriculture. We need to change our mindset. How do we look in their contribution to the growth of the continent? And for that, we really need a mindset from the top down. And they also have to understand the role of universities, of organizations like ours, because we are the one who are going to implement that Africa Free Trade Area. And we have a lot of lessons learned, we have a lot of solutions, but they have to listen to us, and we have to be there where we can influence. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Beatrice. I'm happy that you were able to present your points of views, and you were able to also succinctly answer my 4 questions, which, you know, in one. Thank you. And what you've really done is almost like a call to action, really, because partly is that we need them to hear us, but we also need our voices to be amplified. And I like how you've also shown that even as academic institutions, so here we have Lagos Business School and Riara University, it's saying that, and Riara Business School, it's saying, or Riara School of Business, it's saying that, what are we going to also do about it? What is our in Africa going to do about it? What are different organizations going to do about it to make our voices heard? Because I also know that the ways government work, you know, they have so many voices coming at them, and it's really about saying, how do we state the case? How do we state the impact, the benefit? And how do we make this easy for them for policy making and then for implementation? So really, it's that sense of ownership. It's coming back to ownership. It's coming back to different bodies taking ownership and taking responsibility for the success of the free trade agreement, but then saying, how do we then plug into the various different channels? So Eve, I see you've been answering some questions in the chat box, which I think is fantastic, but I would like you to also then talk a little bit about what ARSO is really trying to do in terms of this amplifying of voices, because I think it's one thing to say you want to standardize, but to standardize, you need to have people keying into that, right? And people understanding what that even means. And just because Henrietta has asked a question, I'll come back to Beatrice, because I think you've spoken very widely. It'll be good to share some of your proposed solutions. And in case anyone is wondering, I've been told I have an extra 5 minutes, so we'll end at 11:45. And any question that isn't being answered, I have recorded all of them. I have documented them. What we're going to do is we will put this across to the panelists. And because we have all your emails, we will then write the responses and share with every registered participant. So Eve, just very quickly answer that question, and then I'll come back to Beatrice.
Thanks, Adan. So, I mean, I've been trying to respond to all those questions that are coming in dozens.
Yes, I've seen that. Thank you. So please also, if you can read in the chat box, I think John really answered most of his questions when he presented. John has also been answering questions. So please don't feel like your question hasn't been answered. To a large extent, they have. The only person I've noticed who has been Beatrice, but I think because of technical difficulties, which is why I'll come back to her after Eve. So over to you, Eve.
Okay. All right. So one of the issues that has been raised in the chat box is the fact that why are we not leveraging on the regional economic community arrangements? We are actually. One thing that we need we need to understand is that the fact that the free trade area is now, being implemented does not mean that SADC, COMESA, ECOWAS, etc., East African Community, ETC, is no longer functioning. These structures are still in place, and we can leverage on them, and we can actually learn lessons from them so that we can make use of those lessons at a continental level. So that's the first point I wanted to highlight. And then in terms of capacity building, yes, the issue of the gap, the knowledge gap has been expressed in the chat platform. There's need for more interaction at national level. Why we say at national level is because this is where the trade is happening. The private sector is operating at national level. They could be exporting outside the continent or between the countries, but essentially what happens is that this agreement, the state parties are signatory to these agreements at national level, meaning that the implementation also has to happen at national level. In other words, the capacity building has to happen at national level. The issue of the national quality infrastructure has to happen at national level. The issues around, just closing the knowledge gap with the SMEs has to happen at national level. So this is quite important. So what I basically responded in the chat platform is that the knowledge is not only for technical people. This knowledge has to be across all divines. We're talking about private sector, policymakers, parliamentarians, the border, customs people. Everyone needs to actually understand their role under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And then coming to your question in terms of ASO, what ASO is doing, ASO is harmonizing standards, but ASO is also part of the Pan-African quality infrastructure, which is actually the continental, we feed into the continental quality infrastructure. And when I mentioned the Africa Trade web portal, I was making this known to everyone on this platform that you can actually receive information on the harmonization of standards, on this Africa Trade web portal, because everything is now going digital. And just to mention that there is a strategy that is currently underway, which I'm coincidentally responsible for, in terms of coming up with under the fourth industrial revolution, because Africa is not only harmonizing on the standards, but we also need to integrate technology as we are doing it. So we're coming up with a strategy for the fourth industrial revolution and coming up with a roadmap, which will be able to link our private sector and our SMEs to be able to receive the appropriate information so that they can leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's a mouthful, but there's a lot going on. This is the point I'm trying to make. There's a lot going on, not only on the standards, but also on the conformity assessment, the technical regulations, on the digitalization, which also needs to be harmonized so that we can have maximum benefit of the free trade area.
Right, thanks, Eve. And you're right. There is a lot going on that that we need to be aware of, and some of it sounds a bit complex. And it's that sense of how do we then simplify it and distill it. So, Beatrice, I'm going to come back to you with two questions. One is from Henrietta, who is a colleague, and she's asking you to talk about some of these solutions that you're talking about in terms of how we can also ensure that for informal sectors, for women, for digitization, and then linking to what Eve has just said, preparing for the fourth industrial revolution, we don't want to be left behind. What are some of the solutions you have? But Hannes has also, and this is, I think, Hannes's second or third question. So I'll answer this one. Hannes also wants to know how the free trade agreement can be instrumental to move African farmers from subsistence to commercial farming, key tools and steps. So really, we're asking you to share some key solutions, the tools to achieve them, and the steps we need to take.
Thank you, Adon. I will start with the one that asking how we move their African farmers from subsistence to profit making, commercial. Yeah. First of all, we have to understand that entrepreneurship, for us at the One Africa, we deal with women and youth who have decided to make agriculture a business, right? So, and I think for that, we have a system of graduation. Yeah, we start from informal, and then they graduate from formal, so become small, medium, and large. We have different categories, right? So at one stage, it is up to and also character. Yeah, business is about character. You need to take a calculated risk. You want to go into business, and I think this is you don't force. We don't fabricate entrepreneurs, but those who have decided to go into the business, we facilitate, we enable them, and we give them tools on how to graduate, because we have it through our process. The small sells to the medium, and the medium sells to the large. So they uptake from one another, and that's the advantage of being in a network like that, because you are able to benefit from training and connecting and B2B, etc. So the second one that I want to answer is that the solutions that we have 4 pillars: financial inclusion, market access, trade facilitation, and agri-technology. For financial inclusion, we have a very, very, very transformative idea. We're dealing with businesses, so it's not charity, it's not grant. What they need, our women and youth, especially the youth startup and the young girls starting up, they need affordable and flexible finance, right? And we do have institutions, right, who can do that, who can deliver that. Yeah, we have African Union, we have Africa Development Bank, which is our continental bank. So they have to have a specific fund that will be affordable and flexible, that they can put as a guarantee fund in any of our local banks. I think the beauty of it, at least in the 43 countries we work in, we have banks that are cross, regional. We have EcoBank, we have Equity, KCB. I mean, we have so many banks now. I mean, that's no longer even an issue. But our women do not graduate, do not grow their business because of the attitude, because of the lack of collateral, because of social traditions that we are not responsible for. So and this, before we get to the parents to decide how the women can also inherit to use the land as collateral, let our banks, facilitate by putting a fund like that will be affordable and flexible. And even when it is affordable, I mean, and I'm very happy that we have universities here and financial institutions. I mean, there is a problem of financial literacy, and that's what we try to address. I mean, even we have women in medium category who are moving between $100,000 and $500,000 turnover per year. And they don't know what is a letter of credit means. They don't know what is short-term finance. They don't know what is contract financing. They don't know what is trading finance. So that's where now this is a call again to the university to come up also, you remain academic, but also come to the solutions that they can address, help, work with us on short-term, short courses, to address those issues of lack of financial literacy. Even if the money is there, we will need to do that. And as a network, of course, that's where now we call the donor community or the government to bring grant, what we call also, or to bring a blended finance, where we call one is for loan and the rest of it is to train and build capacity of doing for those women, to train them how to access those funds and how to service their loans. These are things that people take for granted, but in our group, they move huge money. We all know the women market. They move. Some of them can, if they remove their money from the bank, it will go bad. So we really need to, we have tailor-made classes on that needs to be upgraded. And this is a call to university. We can work together on that. So those are solutions that already is available. And for market access, as I said, they also train in the markets, in the local markets. They don't even know how to supply to supermarkets. It doesn't matter if the volume, and they don't understand even the requirements on how to trade in those local markets. So we have also master classes and one-to-one coaching when we graduate them on how to access those markets. But we need more. We need more resources. We need more partners. We need all of us to get together. You know, this is not a matter of just a private sector. It's everyone, universities, government, everyone. If we wanted to succeed, each of us has to play their part. In agri-technologies, as I said, you know, we have a platform, a digital platform, and we are now moving to the e-market. And we are saying, for those young people, for those people who are able to trade on the platform, let them start, and the others will follow as we are training. So I think for us as a business organization, women business organization, we know how women are resilient, and it's something African women, they've been resilient for centuries and centuries. And all we are saying is that we need collaborators and partners, because we are lagging behind. We need all the forces that can be on the continent. It's a business of all of us to come and assist in catching up and upgrading. This is what we need. And we need the universities really to track those changes in reducing the gap. Thank you, Adon. I'll stop there.
Right. Thank you so much, Beatrice. Thank you so much for sharing your insights in terms of how we can, you know, what are the key tools, and also what are some of the steps to get the solutions that we need. Thank you also for the call to action. To be honest, when we were starting this panel, and when John and Eve and you were also speaking, I thought to ask myself that as a sustainability center, we need to contact you and see, you know, three of you, and, you know, see how we can also then write some sort of technical notes on some of the key things that have been proposed here. And what we will do is we will get that started so that we can also start providing some of the solutions to what we've said, particularly because, you know, John has mentioned the importance of this distilling and how we can also ensure that at least across the continent, businesses know what they can do and what they should do. But also thank you for the very practical ideas that you've given as well, and the call for universities, you know, because we have a role to play as the academia as well, to see how we can monitor and track some of these impacts that the AFTA is supposed to have. So I would like to thank my panelists. I think we have played a very strong role in almost unpacking the free trade agreement for sustainable development, because at the end of the day, Africa is still a developing continent, and our solutions need to ensure that it leads to economic, sociocultural, and environmental development. And one of the key things we have to make sure is that how do we ensure that the positive impacts are, you know, enhanced, and the negative impacts of the free trade agreement are mitigated. So thank you so much to my panelists. Thank you so much also to the participants. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for engaging and staying with us, even though we started a bit late and we've ended a bit late. And like I said, we will get back to you within the week so that all the questions, even those that have been answered, we will answer them and share them with all registered participants so that you don't feel like your questions haven't been answered. So thank you, and I'll hand over back now to Oreva. Goodbye, panelists. I'll give a round of applause. We can clap for our panelists, and I think we can do that in the chat box. I think we should give a round of applause to the panelists. So please see if you can react, actually the reactions, so we can clap your hands, and thank you all. So yeah.
Yes, round of applause. Thank you very much, everyone. If I can ask IT team, could you please make Tiki a co-host again? Because I should be handing over back to her. Thank you. So that she can unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reva. Thank you for the panel, and thank you, Adun. I think we could have carried on talking the whole afternoon about this, because I think it's something that John and Adun said, the enormity of this agreement sometimes seems totally insurmountable. But then if I go back to what Silver said, we have the opportunity to lift 100 million people out of poverty. So it's the right thing to do. And yes, Beatrice, I think what you also said is that if we wanted to succeed, we need to work together. But in the interest of time, let me shift to that concept or that discipline that keeps me awake at night and my reason for getting up every morning. So we are now going to hand over to our panel to discuss strong institutions, SDGs, shared value, and responsible business. And just a little bit about the shared value business management concept. The concept this year is 10 years old. By any means, it's still a very young concept. And shared value, somebody said yesterday, I think in the chat, talked about inclusiveness. And shared value is an umbrella concept that is all inclusive. It includes all disciplines and principles of responsible business, sustainability, social and environmental impact, profitability, innovation, purpose. I can go on and on. It's about stakeholder capitalism. It's about our suppliers, our value chain, our employees, and the communities in which we operate. But most of all, it is about profit with purpose. And it's also the tool that you can use as an organization to implement or to align to the Sustainable Development Goals. But let me hand over now to Makeda, who is our moderator on this particular panel. She'll introduce all of our speakers. I'm very happy to say when I look at the screen, it is females. And as Beatrice was saying, Beatrice, we made very sure that we have a 50-50 split in these 2 days on the 13th and 14th. So Riva and myself were always very conscious about the gender parity for this particular, for our forum. So Makeda, I'm handing over to you now to take us through the next hour, talking about strong institutions, the SDGs, shared value, and responsible business. And thank you for that. Is Makeda unmuted?
The amount of Zooms that I've done, I'm still making this mistake. Thanks so much, Tiki. It's not lost on me that the panel is full of brilliant women, and I'm so excited to be able to moderate this one for you all today. So ladies and gentlemen, all Zoom protocol observed, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel in which we will be discussing, as Tiki mentioned, responsible business, shared value, SDGs, and strong institutions. My name is Makeda Mahadio, and of course, I'll be the moderator for this session. Thanks once again for joining us. As we know, and what's becoming more and more evident as time goes on and more urgent global challenges present themselves, just having a successful business, just being an entrepreneur, just providing jobs, just doing the mandatory CSR just won't cut it anymore. Everyone's becoming more accountable for making real change. And today we're going to discuss how that doesn't have to be separate from running a successful business. Responsible business can be just as lucrative, if not more, than the alternative, and can provide not only necessary impact, but more reliable sustainability and longevity for your business. So, that's what we're diving into today. And I have some brilliant panelists that are going to share their experiences with the topic, and of course, answer some of the questions that you may have on how to run a responsible, successful business. After all, as the biblical saying goes, to whom much is given, much is required. So before I introduce my brilliant panelists, a quick note on that, asking questions. I would like this to be as interactive as possible. The last panel was quite interactive and I love seeing all the questions. So in order for you to get as much as you possibly can out of this session, please do not be shy. If you feel compelled, go ahead, continue to put your questions in the chat box and we will get those questions answered. Of course, we want you to come out of this conversation having gained more insights and answering any lingering questions that you may have had about conducting good, responsible business. And with all of that being said, I think we can go ahead and introduce our panelists, who, by the way, are all members of the Shared Value Africa initiative. So I would like for each panelist that I introduce to just give a very brief personal statement as to how they've interacted with shared value in their experience as I introduce them. First up, I'm going to do this person last. I'm not sure if she's on the call yet. So first up, we have the Managing Executive responsible for Group Corporate Citizenship and Community Investments for Africa at ABSA Group Limited. She specializes in developing and executing strategic plans for smaller enterprises, and her expertise lies in business development, creating shared value, sustainability, and financial inclusion. She's a Harvard Business School graduate, and prior to joining ABSA, she founded and ran an NGO that focused on developing MSMEs. Please welcome to the panel Sazini Mojapelo. Sazini, if you are here with us, please turn on your camera and give us, just a few words about how you've interacted with shared value. Sazini, if you're here on the call, I'm not seeing you.
I am on the call. I'm not sure.
Hello. Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure if it's good evening yet. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be here today. I look forward to sharing insights. The one thing you didn't mention in my profile is that actually I'm a board member and a chair of the Shift Africa, working with Tiki, advancing the Shared Value Initiative. So I'm actually here in my capacity, yes, as the managing executive from the ABSA Group, an organization that's implementing the shared value philosophy and thinking and management practice, but also quite importantly, as a chair of the Shift Africa, which is working with the Shared Value Africa initiative. So within that context, I will start off by speaking in broad terms, particularly around the importance of organizations shifting, excuse the pun, to adopt the shared value model. As an organization, when we started the shared value journey, it was still under the Barclays umbrella. And as most people on this call or discussion would know, ABSA was initially Barclays on the continent. So we've got quite a long legacy of providing universal banking services in our different countries. And within that context, one of the critical things that we needed to do as an organization was to look at how we drive profit with purpose. A corporate our size looks at the systemic impact that we have in the different countries, and therefore looks at our social footprint, our business footprint, and our contribution to the GDP of the economies we operate in. Within that light and context, it is where we adopted the shared value principles and model. We worked quite closely with Mark Kramer and Michael Porter and the FSG group to understand how we would implement that as a bank. And obviously with the Shared Value Africa initiative being launched, we're one of the founding members, proudly so. That made sure that the understanding and the implementation of creating shared value as an organization our size was carried through in all the countries we operated in, over 10 countries, and looked at specific product services of how we would drive that agenda. Underpinning all of this for us was to create a meaningful contribution in the countries where we operate, but also driving shareholder value. So from that perspective, I think I can stop there as a brief introduction and hand over back to you, Makeda.
Right. We will definitely be getting a bit more in depth. And you're right. I didn't mention that, which is crazy because you're going to be an excellent resource for this discussion. Thank you so much for that, Sazini. Next up, we have the head of responsible business at Old Mutual Limited. She is responsible for leading the company's sustainable development strategy across 13 countries on the continent. She has a slew of professional qualifications and is a Cambridge graduate. She has 20 years experience in the financial sector and is an avid marathon runner. Please welcome Kanye Chava. Kanye, if you're there, go ahead and briefly give us your experience with the Shared Value initiative.
Makena, thank you so much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here. I hope you can see my video and that you can hear me clearly. The most important issue about shared value for us as Old Mutual is that from inception, the way we were started as an organization was at the back of how we can be responsible and be there for our customers and our broader society at the time when they needed us most. So Old Mutual's really purpose is about mutually being there, championing our customers' lives to make them better on a daily basis. And that is a core essence of shared value. We're also quite big in responsible investment, where our focus is how, at the back of growing our business, over the 176 years that we've been around, how does that make a difference and contribute a positive impact in the society's lives? So we've learned over the years as an organization that we're not operating in isolation. In fact, I was so excited to hear and listen to Beatrice talking earlier about collaboration and partnerships and what it would mean, particularly for financial institutions, to partner the women, particularly in the sectors where she is focusing on. So my own personal journey as a marathon runner, as a mountaineer, really talks to the core principles of shared value, and I can't wait to continue participating in this panel. Thank you for this opportunity.
Kanye, thank you so much for, of course, joining us on the panel. Our next speaker is Karen Bassier. Karen is the head of sustainable business and social impact at Safaricom, where she leads the sustainability vision and ambition for the company. She has 15 years experience in this space and is passionate about the interplay between people, purpose, and profits. A lot of what we're talking about today. Karen, thanks so much for being here and welcome to the panel. Can you briefly tell us a bit about your experience with the shared value model?
Thank you so much, Chinedu. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen, as you've heard. Safaricom is honored to be part of this forum. We exist to transform lives, and we aspire to use our products and services to contribute to sustainable living throughout Kenya. Currently, our products and services play an important role in the lives of 35 million Kenyans. And Safaricom has been on its shared value journey for a number of years now. Through this period, we have constantly reevaluated our business to look into how we can leverage our technology to address the challenges that face society. We believe that the role of business extends far beyond making profits, which is why the company's vision is to use its products and services to improve the quality of life and contribute to sustainable livelihoods for people throughout Kenya. Central to achieving this vision is the company's commitment to managing its operations responsibly and ethically. This vision is based on a twin pillar of a responsible, ethical business and transformational products and services. In 2012, Safaricom integrated sustainability into its corporate strategy, bringing it in line with the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016 to help translate its sustainability ideals into meaningful and concrete plans, from overarching objectives to simply daily activities that could be put in place throughout the organization. So through the SDGs, Safaricom is committed to deliver connectivity and innovative products and services that will provide unmatched solutions to meet the needs of Kenyans by enabling access through our technologies and partners and exploring opportunities in health, education, energy. So Safaricom's aim is to do so by managing our operations, as I've said, responsibly and ethically. And we believe as a company, if we do this, we will stimulate growth and generate value for the company, the society in which we operate, and the economy. So as a company, we remain committed to using the shared value model, and we remain committed to using shared value to live out our purpose of transforming lives. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much, Karen, for that. And I'll be definitely coming back to you for some of your experience with that, because we know that Safaricom, like many of the panelists here, is a superstar of the Shared Value Initiative. So we're looking forward to hearing more of your insights. Our next and final panelist to introduce is the Senior Executive Manager of Communication and Marketing at the Hotrain Management Agency. She has been involved in comms for over 3 decades, and her specialty includes government and international relations. She holds a doctorate in business management and frequently delivers papers at national and international conferences. I'd like you to please welcome Dr. Barbara Jensen. I know she was running a bit late, so Barbara, if you are on the call now, if you managed to arrive, please go ahead and give us just a brief word or two about your experience with shared value. Barbara, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm here. It's strange that in these times we still run late. Even though you are sitting at your house working from home and you still run late. Strange times we live in. Thank you very much for the invitation from the Lagos Business School, also from Tiki and the Shared Value Initiative. And hello to all my fellow sisters. It's great to share this moment in time with you. Gautrain and public transport, shared value, and you can ask the question, why did you invite me? I think the concept of public transport and shared value goes absolutely hand in hand, and especially if you look at Gautrain as a public-private partnership. And I will talk and allude a little bit to that when I do my, when we speak in the panel about this. I've been working on Gautrain now for 21 years, been involved in it since we started our planning. And doing public-private partnerships and looking at it from a shared value point of view, I think if I look back on it now, while you guys were talking, I was sort of thinking, you girls were talking, I was thinking, public-private partnerships, if we actually manage it properly, as we did on Gautrain, it's just another word for shared value, because that's actually how you share value if you do a public-private partnership correctly. We've been involved with the Shared Value Initiative for quite some time, although officially only for a couple of months. But I've started talking to Tiki about shared value and unofficially been involved with it for quite some time. And Kanye said she's a marathon runner and been running this race and willing to run this race for quite some into the future. I'm not a marathon runner, but I'm a wildlife photographer, and I have patience. I can sit for 8 hours waiting for a coalition of cheetahs to wake up and to start to hunt. So I have patience. We can walk this journey together. So thank you, Makeda. That's me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And I encourage our panelists, if you're able to just go ahead and keep your cameras on during the conversation, just so that, we can be together on this. So let's go ahead and start up this conversation, and I was thinking to start off, because there is so much to kind of get into, but maybe we could start where we are, right? So I'm pretty sure everyone here knows that we are and have been in the throes of a global pandemic. And it almost seems as though the shared value model or profit with purpose was designed for moments like these, right? So in terms of, you know, times of crisis, your instinct is to almost focus on survival, you know, your survival, the survival of your business. But in this case, prioritizing your survival as a business is still creating the impact that's so important in times like this, right? So by the very nature of the model, you're kind of doing that. And I wanted to ask our panelists, you know, what have you been doing or seeing in these times, let's say over the past year, that have kind of validated why and how you conduct your responsible business the way that you do? And I think we can go ahead and start off with Sazini.
Yeah, no, as you were asking the question, I think it's one of those where from a business perspective, it was an equalizer. We all shut our doors and we had to stay at home. And it forced business models to change. First, we had a huge public health crisis, a humanitarian crisis where we all responded as corporates and businesses to see how we can alleviate the impact of the pandemic in people's lives. And then secondly, we had to look at how we support our colleagues, the employees in the organization. So policies immediately had to be drafted, changed. Resilience for the organization was one of the primary focus and factors that we took into account. And a third, we had to look at beyond. So first was our response in the communities, which is unlike most corporates. Second was colleagues and employees. Third was our business model. It had to drastically change. We had, as a bank, to look at how we're going to continue running our business whilst we're all sitting at home. And it is an essential service. So we had the latitude of being able to still operate, but find other innovative ways to drive our products and services and support people during this time and provide the help that is required and run our business in a manner that reaches people in different places. I think what was the most telling and important element for us was to look at technology and look to technology as one of the main drivers of changing and supporting our business. This is where shared value then comes to play. Whereas before, you would look at digital services at a particular segment, it became quite important to see how, from a financial inclusion perspective, digital services and products are not a unique proposition, but actually is something that should be given and distributed to all. And that's where I think the democratization of data and technology and starting to look at the costings around that to create a greater financial inclusion, but more importantly, to support people and help people bank where they are. For us, at the nexus of our shared value agenda, advancing inclusive financing is a key agenda for us as a bank. So we have had to innovate around that, which is a key element around shared value, looking at how you innovate, develop new products and services that create win-win solutions for you as a business, for the customer, and for the community. So we've had, within this COVID times, had to adjust. And what was quite interesting, and I'll end here, what was quite interesting was with, particularly with COVID and social distancing and not being able to touch things and sanitize, that means we had to actually move into a virtual world and help our customers move into a virtual world, help our communities move into a virtual world, forcing us to develop products and services that allow people to continue using our products in a virtual world. And that in itself is turning our business model upside down and starting to look at communities, colleagues, as one that we need to be supporting customers and clients. So I would say for me, the impact of COVID on our business has actually forced us into the fourth industrial revolution. And we started looking at how to support and drive our products virtually.
Thanks so much for that insight, Sazini. Karen, you know, with Safaricom, you've kind of been sitting in that digital space for some time, and that's where we kind of assume that you're comfortable. What has this time sort of revealed to you in terms of, using the shared value model, and have you learned anything new from this time, or has it kind of been, I don't want to say business as usual because it hasn't been for anyone, but you've already been online. So what have you kind of observed from this? How has it validated the way that you've done your business?
I think for Safaricom, what we noticed is that COVID threw us right at the center of ensuring that other businesses can thrive. Yeah. So when I look at Safaricom, we looked at it from 3 key areas. So if I look at from the position of our employees, we needed to get all our employees to work from home. We being a telecommunication company, we have engineers all over the place. We have our customer care working at the office. So we had to change that model for our employees, where our employees now could now work from home. So I'm happy to say that being a telecommunication company, I think up to 80% of our employees work from home. So that was a plus for us, and ensuring that they all had the equipment they needed and the support they needed to work and deliver from home. Then when it came to society, as a business, we believe that Safaricom cannot thrive where the society around us is failing. So we had to look and see how do we then step in and support the society from a philanthropic point, from a shared value perspective. So some of the initiatives we did around society was, for instance, step in and give PPEs to our medical units. So we did give PPEs for many of the county hospitals that would not have had this. Then we ran a very strong campaign because we realized as employees of Safaricom, we were privileged to still being able to earn a salary. So we called it the 6,000 Strong campaign, where we asked our colleagues to raise money so that we can share with those who have been highly impacted. So we raised a good amount of money, and then Vodafone matched us up, and we quickly mobilized and went to the communities that had been impacted during the serious lockdown, where they could do nothing, and just at least say, as a company, as employees of Safaricom, we are here for you. So that is one of the things that that we did for society. Other than that, we introduced something called a COVID response. So this was just to ask the communities in Kenya to kindly write to us proposals so that we can at least support them. So we had a lot of COVID response initiatives for our communities, the communities in which we operate. Then when I come to our customer, when I look at the customer, this is where we did a lot. We first zero-rated the mobile money transactions below a certain amount. We talked to the banks to also zero-rate it. So we came across, and I think this was the beauty of it all, coming across as industry, banking, telecommunications, the financial sector, to say, you know what, we are going to push on our customers. So we zero-rated a lot of the transactions. Then as a business, we realized that we had technology at the center. So we decided to give double bandwidth. So we knew people are working from home, people need this, so we give double bandwidth for everyone to be able to work from home. We accelerated fiber connections to different places and businesses. And on top of that, I think for me, the best and most impactful one was on education, when we totally gave away our shared value product called Shupavu. Shupavu is a revision tool. When schools were closed, we knew our students in Kenya really needed this. So we gave it for free, but also went ahead to support the teachers and then the children who would never have access to a device. So we also brought in the shared value model. And I remember partnering with Samsung and the likes to just come in and ensure that digital learning continued. So when I look around, I can remember the figure. We also supported the country's COVID response by giving almost 150 million. That was about 65 million USD, just to cushion the Kenyan society. Because as I said, Safaricom, we strongly believe we cannot thrive when the society around us is failing.
Right. And absolutely, it's clear that, Safaricom did quite a bit in order to sort of, do its part in helping out during the time of crisis. But the part that you know, that I'm kind of seeing that fit into the business model there, I suppose, is where, you know, you zeroed the fees, you kind of, the infrastructure was already there for you to be able to help your clients because it was already a part of the business model. You know, Sazini mentioned, you know, the pandemic having forced business models to change. Kanye, I want to know what your thoughts are on that. And I want to know what your thoughts are on, or if you have any advice, let's say, you know, for companies who are looking to do that now, who want to sort of switch things up and see how they can, you know, get more shared value into their business operations now that they've seen this conversation, you know, now that they're inspired, or people who have been thinking of doing it anyway. You know, what are your thoughts on that? You're muted.
Unmute, the most used word between 2019 and 2020. Mute, unmute, can you hear me?
Oh, true.
I think it's encouraging, inspiring to see how organizations have responded. When I listen to Sazini and Karen and Barbara, I think COVID-19 took us back to the center of why we are in business in the first place. That yes, it's about profitability, but at the back of what? And also COVID-19 said you can compete, but there are certain things that you can't compete on. When I listen to Sazini, she's almost saying the same story that Old Mutual actually used to respond to COVID-19. And the biggest lesson for us, and it's something that we should not lose as business and as broader stakeholders, in the midst of crisis, we found ourselves. In the midst of crisis, we literally had to go back to our purpose. And when we go back to our purpose as Old Mutual, that's where we started with our response to COVID-19, where it was about to champion mutually positive futures every day for our customers and for the broader society, whilst making sure that business continued. You'd be aware that recently we actually publicized our business results. And as we know, globally and in the continent, most organizations did not perform the way we would have wanted to profitably. But it was okay because of the crisis and at the time where we find ourselves. In the challenge of really having your profits being taken away, it was in a way a lesson that says there is space for business to respond with a much more consciousness. COVID-19 put a heart in businesses. So my advice and guidance to other businesses is look at what comes with your business first. What is the most critical path for the success of your business? And use that critical path and that dependency to build yourselves. As an example for Old Mutual, our critical path, like every other business, is our customers. Karen talks about financial inclusivity. It is the most critical path for Old Mutual to succeed. If we don't have customers who understand financial management, if we don't have young people in a society that's educated enough to understand how to operate in the mainstream of business, we're dead in the water. So COVID-19, like Sazin was saying, forced us to even hone in on what comes naturally with our business. So financial education and the broader education was one of the key aspects that we focused in. You would remember, most of our partners would remember, that's when we launched the overall concept of providing Africa's biggest classroom, because education is one of those key factors that COVID-19 exposed in how, as a continent, we were not ready to deal with the crisis, particularly for those in the lower end of the market. And we also looked at what matters most about our business. You know, McKenna, our business, we used to be a business that really secures people's lives. You get funeral policies, we assist with investment into your future. 2019 asked us how ready are we to answer the question. We used to say, should you die? Do you have enough cover? Should you die? 2019 came and happened. And we had to respond in a way that said we understood and we put our mouth exactly where we were walking. We put aside, when it took a risk cover for our frontline staff, over 4 billion rand that we as a business put out there for anybody who qualified that needed to be covered. And can I tell you something? There was an increase in our claims. So we realized that business is not about marketing gimmick. It's not about the headlines. There's a reality that came with COVID-19 and we should not lose that. And then small businesses, and I won't talk more about this because the other panels, they also focused on that. Who are the members of our society who needed us most? It was young people, those who did not have access to education. It was small businesses who could not get enough funding because, as Beatrice was saying earlier, yes, you qualify, but who do you have a bigger voice? Once as a business, you're saying we've got enough funding to assist small businesses, are we ready for people who do not have a normal way of answering the questions that we have set for ourselves? Going back to Sazini's point, we had to do things differently. We have to talk to women because women have specific needs as far as business is concerned. Young people have got specific needs as far as access to education is concerned, but also as a broader society, what type of product are we offering? The last bit in terms of the advice and what we did based on our experience, we're one of the biggest investors as far as responsible investment is concerned. So gone are the days where, for an example, we have a school infrastructure. We had huge funds where we were building schools, huge funds where we were building infrastructure that today it has been proven by COVID-19, half of the infrastructure that we have actually does not work because now it's about digitalizing everything that we do. So how do you repurpose your funding structure? How do you repurpose your overall business objectives to meet the needs of today? You could never go wrong if you respond on the basis of what do you have first in terms of your human resources, your financial strength, and also what is your business purpose. And only businesses who understand those principles, I think, will survive.
Right. I mean, well, we've certainly been thrust into a situation where, it's about now responding. So, there's less space for trying to ponder that. And now is the time for action. I like what you said about COVID I think you said COVID putting the heart in business. And what Sazini said about, leveling the playing field. And, I think it's evident. We all know that things have changed, maybe for good, in terms of how people are doing business, and not just when it comes to digitalization, but the impact that we're making, the responsibility aspect. And Barbara, I wanted to ask this one to you. You mentioned it when you were talking, the nature of PPPs kind of already being shared value in essence. Do you think that government should take more action in terms of making sure that the private sector is being more responsible? Do you think that there should be regulations about, conducting responsible business? Do you think that it shouldn't be up to just the entrepreneur, that there should be standards that are met, especially on the back of what's happening now?
Of course, there should be. And I think most governments have those regulations in place. I can only talk for the South African government, but in South Africa we have the King Codes, and that reflects on responsible government, and we are very if we look at our government structures, even in government, we have to look at the King Codes. But private sector has always been contributing to social projects, and in the olden days we called it corporate social investment, corporate social responsibility, and very often businesses, companies saw that as their guilt fund. They dump money, at the lack of a better word, dump money into their corporate social responsibility funds, and then they carried on polluting the environment, treating their staff badly, or treating a country that they are doing business in, the people badly, the environment badly, and then just dumped a couple of $1,000, $100,000 into that corporate social investment fund. That has changed dramatically, and fortunately for us. And I think also shared value and the way shared value is looking at corporate social responsibility, or a new way of looking at corporate social responsibility, has changed that. And also think with public-private partnerships. For example, Gautrain, when we started constructing Gautrain, one of the elements in our concession agreement, because when you look at a concession agreement, the public-private partnership, the foundation of a public-private partnership is your concession agreement, and you live and die by that. When we announced our successful bidder, well, we had a preferred bidder and a reserve bidder. We announced our preferred bidder in 2005, and July 2005. We came to financial closure in September 2006. We only signed the concession agreement in January 2007. And that's how long it takes. And it's contracts. The concession agreement, the actual agreement, is something like 100,000 pages, because it's all about risk and risk transfer. And you live and die by that concession agreement. And part of that, and part of our concession agreement was corporate social responsibility, or what we called our SIP fund, our social investment project. And when we know, and we're busy planning Gautrain 2, and Gautrain 2 will definitely look at shared value. As long as I'm there, and other people, and my CEO that I roped into, and my board that I roped into shared value, will definitely look at shared value and how we will roll out shared value in the next concession agreement, and make it part of the risk and the concession agreement, so that we make it part of a PPP. And I would just like to and we tend to forget this as South Africans and as Africans. And it's something that Africa has to be very proud of. When we signed the concession agreement on Gautrain in 2006, when we had financial close, this was not only the biggest PPP that was signed in Africa, it was the biggest concession agreement signed, the value of it, in the world. When we signed, we won some other financial organizations prize that year for the biggest greenfields project PPP signed that year in the world. So Africa can be very proud of the scope and the nature of a project, of a PPP, such as Gautrain, that we rolled out in Africa. Because Gautrain's philosophy, as part of our concession agreement, that alludes to spatial and emotional connections, not only spatial, but emotional connections, transcended mobility and our brand value. And this heightened the brand loyalty, and that created, and that made creating shared value. And we didn't have a name we didn't call it shared value. We didn't even know that we were creating shared value. But it made creating shared value that much easier. Right. And then shared value, we also didn't know that now, we know it now, is always about addressing societal and environmental issues. It was written into our environmental management plan in 2006. Right. Now we know that it's shared value. We didn't have a name to it now. And we're bound by law to follow that. If we have an operational environmental management plan as well. If I look back on that now, it's shared value.
Right. Well, that is actually, and I'm so sorry to cut you, Barbara, but that is something that I kind of did want to sort of clear up, because it's easy to not be quite sure as to what we mean when we say the shared value, or rather the shared value business model. So maybe, Sazini, you can clear that up for anyone who's on the call who's not quite sure. Is there a difference, or what is the difference between corporate social responsibility or outreach and doing business by the shared value model? Or is it the same? Is it interchangeable?
I was listening to Barbara and I actually started scribbling, what is shared value? Because of the journey that she was expressing of how Train went about it. For me, I know most of us would have read the Michael Porter and Mark Kramer article around creating shared value. However, when I look at it and we started looking at how to adopt it as an organization, we curated a different approach. It can start with looking at it from a societal impact perspective, but in where we've landed, and the simplest way for me to explain what creating shared value looks like is there are three circles. I wish I had a pen and I would draw it. The first area that you look at, or analysis you need to make as an organization, regardless of size, is what is the societal challenge that you as a business seek to address? We're in the financial services sector, so that means a primary focus for us is financial inclusion, providing financial access to the general public. So within that context and within our business model and our purpose and reason for existence, that is why we exist as an organization. So what is the societal challenge within that we would want to address? The second circle then looks at what are our corporate assets and our expertise that can help us address the societal challenge. So within that, we would look at the fact that, for example, we've got a large branch network. So we've got a lot of infrastructure, which can be used differently and repurposed, particularly in the period of COVID, they can be repurposed differently. We look at our products and services. We've got commercial property financing, for example, where we can look at affordable student housing. We're addressing the challenge of the societal students not having access to student accommodation when they're in varsity, for example. So I'm giving an idea of what I'm referring to. And within that, when you've got the three, the last one is looking at what is the business opportunity. And I think that's where we miss it, and the key differentiator comes in from CSI, from just looking at the perspective of CSR, because the business opportunity is central to creating shared value. You have to look at the sustainability of your business, the benefit that accrues back to your shareholders, to your private sector or people who've invested in your business, and most importantly, you as an entrepreneur, if it is a small business. So if you look at those three circles, the nexus within that center is where you're creating shared value. So first and foremost, if I can recap, what is the societal challenge that you want to address? And it is typically aligned to the purpose of your business. Why do you exist? So for Gautrain, for example, they transport people. They move people from one area to the other. How do they do that in an environmentally sustainable way? How do they make sure that people are safe? So you start looking at the core purpose of your business. That's the societal challenge that you look for and try and address. What do you have as an organization from your corporate assets and your expertise, which speaks to your products, your services, your value proposition, what you offer? And lastly, and most importantly, where it becomes shared value, what is the business opportunity that lies within that? And I've given the example of where there is a shortage in student housing. And as a bank, one of our biggest focus areas is commercial property financing. So in addressing student housing and the challenges that are within that, we start looking at how we can develop different models that allow us to build student housing in the universities that are out of town or excluded in a profitable manner for us as a business, but also addressing the huge crisis of where students are not able to and are not supported and sleeping in libraries because they don't have student housing. So if you look at all of that, you as an organization are now addressing the question of how I'm creating shared value. Secondly, I think quite important is to think of it from a value chain perspective, downstream, upstream. How do we support downstream industries? How do we support upstream industries? The SME sector becomes quite critical, as would be partnerships at a private public sector level. How do we then partner at that scale? And if I continue the train of the student housing, obviously the Department of Education becomes central to those conversations. But at the same time, if I look at downstream industries, who is constructing and building those student housing? It becomes preferential procurement to make sure that I bring in the SME sector, creating shared value. And within that, I think when you then look at it from that perspective, you start realizing the ecosystem that is around that and how you as an organization, regardless of size, if you apply this business model, you actually can then shift and start creating shared value and move away from, as Barbara said, the 100,000 as a bandage to deal with a societal issue and environmental issue. It's an ecosystem approach, it's value chain, it's looking at downstream, upstream, and what your purpose as an organization looks like, how you deal with that societal challenge, how you then drive your business and look at the business opportunities within that. I would sum it up that way.
I mean, from there, I kind of made my own circles. So
exactly, you got it.
So we have the societal challenges, where that meets the business resources, and where that meets the business opportunity. That's where you have that shared value sweet spot, if you will. There is only there's less than 20 minutes left, I think, for this discussion. So I do want to get to some of the questions that are in the chat box as we continue on with our talk. There is one here saying, please, it's coming from Rosemary. She says, please share any challenges you encountered with your shareholders and executives when introducing and embedding shared value model in the business. Now, I don't know, Kanye or Karen or Barbara, I don't know who would want to take this one. Kanye, you look like you're gearing up.
Yes, I will take it. The thing is about shared value and incorporating what we now call environmental, social, and governance issues is a leadership issue. It starts at a personal leadership first. So if you have a CEO who at the personal level doesn't understand what his role is in the society, that's where you'd have a challenge. So in our experience as Old Mutual, because our purpose as a business is also premised on shared value principle, it was, yes, a long-term journey. As Barbara was saying, it's a marathon. It's actually an ultra marathon. But the most important thing is to demonstrate the business value, because shared value is not, as Sazini is saying, CSI. You should not shy away from simply saying it's about making sure you're building your business, because it is a responsible business thing at the end of the day to build your business. Businesses have so many dependencies. So you can't just be driving a business principle based on philanthropy. So if you are able to show a business case at the back of shared value, then the journey becomes much more better. It's also about the language that we use, because you still have to speak the business of the language of business, again, for business to understand why it is important. Our journey as Old Mutual, I must say, it started a bit slow, but once we understood, especially in 2019, when COVID-19 hit us at the core of our business, we knew that if we don't invest in a responsible manner, particularly applying the ESG principles on environmental, social, and governance, if we don't look at the societal impact as part of the ecosystem, we will not be there for the next 176 years. So it is a journey, it is a leadership, but you have to put it at the heart of what matters for business.
Right, that word that we always hear, sustainability, so important in so many different ways, right? There are a few more comments that are happening in the chat box. One is coming from Donald. It says shared values are found among the people. Cooperatives already reflect shared values. This is why there is harmony among them. There should be supporting these should be supported with other niceties of life to nurture such values that promote social harmony. And then there's another one that is coming from Felicia. It says, please, is any of the panelists organizations engaging in entrepreneurial development in their communities? How are they going about this? What are the outcomes? I think Karen may have touched on it when she was saying some of the outreach that Safaricom engages in, but I don't know if anyone else would like to kind of chime in there.
I could chime in that one. So I would like to share about a product, a shared value product called DigiFarm. So DigiFarm is a product by Safaricom where we bring farmers onto a platform where they get information on agriculture, the time to plant, and so on and so forth. So one of the projects we have done under agribusiness is in quite an area where there's fertile land in Kenya towards the border of Tanzania. There's very fertile at the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. There's fertile land, but the people in this area, the entrepreneurs or the agricultural society here, believed in animal rearing. But if they could grow high value crops, they would get more. So for the last 6 months during the COVID, we introduced them to growing high value crops. And for us, it's a shared value model because for us, agriculture is a business. We have put technology, which is our asset, at the center of it. The community benefits. So what happens is you grow the crops. Safaricom has connected you to the market using our platform. You interact there. So when the crops are ready, the buyers come to the farm and collect. Then they pay through our portal. So it's a win-win situation. For us as Safaricom, we make money on the portal. The farmer makes money by selling the crops, and the buyer also knows there's a steady place where I can get a supply of certain things. That is one. When I look at the other model that we've done in entrepreneurship is engaging young people. So most companies or most models would be you give scholarships, so you train young people and then they go find their own jobs. So we work with partners where we say we want to negotiate with supermarkets or insurance companies in Kenya and say, for you to sell insurance, you really don't need a degree. So all we need to do is upskill you, give you entrepreneurial skills in this area, then set you free and go get the job. So we have done this using technology, connecting the young people into these other opportunities. And it goes on, and I can explain many more other scenarios of developing entrepreneurs, but I like focusing on the youth because that's where we have a huge dividend. So those are just two examples of how we've used shared value to connect entrepreneurs and markets and so on.
Right. And how about, now that you've ended that way, just on a larger level, and maybe we can even rope Barbara back in for this one. Before our panel, there was a discussion about the AFCFTA. And I would like to kind of explore a bit more about how suitable rather is the shared value model to be able to be spread across the continent. How suitable is it to work with the AFCFTA, and what would that look like? I don't know if Barbara, you'd like to chime in here, or if anyone else would feel comfortable to kind of discuss that. But how do you think the concept of shared value can be used across the AFCFTA and with the AFCFTA?
Well, before we get to the ACTFA, Makeda, I think shared value is in the nature of us as Africans. It is in the spirit of Ubuntu. It's in the spirit of how we live as Africans. It is not what we have to go out and try to do. It is how we live. It's how we do business. It's how we share. So I don't think we have to go and externalize something that we've always been doing. We just have to go and put a label on it and start practicing and start to like we've all been doing, sitting around this table, Old Mutual, Safaricom in Kenya. I mean, I think Safaricom is, I always look at what Safaricom is doing outside South Africa as an example. They're way ahead of, and obviously Discovery. I mean, Safari is the poster child of shared value. But we just have to go and what we've always been doing, growing up, running our communities. We just have to go and we just have to go and bring that into our businesses and put the shared value, if you want, label onto it and roll it out and never forget that it's also about profit. Because if we want to get the dominant coalition of the real exco and your board behind you, because the moment that they think they're going to lose profit, you're not going to get them behind you.
Right.
You have to convince them the whole time that it's also you're not leaving your eye off the ball of profit. It's also about business profit. And in the end of the day, you're going to make more profit. Right. And I don't know whether Kanye is agreeing with me. I see her shaking her head up and down.
Yes.
I've got my board now on crossing fingers, but I've got my board now. After 3 years, I've got my board on board now.
Right.
But it's difficult. It took 3 years.
And I think, Barbara, you have them on board because you're speaking the language. And as I was saying earlier, we should not be shy in saying business is here for business sustainability first. And therefore, if you speak the language, it should come naturally in terms of how then shared value principles are incorporated into the business. If anything, if you don't incorporate shared value principles, to Barbara's point, you are going to lose out in the future as a business.
Right. I mean, I think that's what makes the model sort of stand out. It almost feels like a win-win. This whole concept of profit with purpose, there's no losing out on anything there because it's exactly what you want to do as an entrepreneur and what you're responsible to do as, you know, as a member of society. I can see that our time's going down. We only have about 5 minutes left. So I'd like to get everyone's final thoughts here. What would you like for everyone here to sort of leave with? What would you like for them, you know, entrepreneurs and different people in different professionals in the private sector and students or aspiring entrepreneurs? I mean, what would you like them to leave with knowing about shared value and about profit with purpose? Let's go ahead and start in the order that we kind of, well, what's on my screen. So let's go ahead and start with Sazini.
I did think about that. And I think for any organization or business, regardless of size, if you lead with purpose, you will ultimately create shared value. If the purpose of your organization is to provide financial services, is to provide insurance, is to a retail sector, whatever it is, if you look at how to best serve your customer and within that deal with the societal challenge that you have, there is a business opportunity in that. And I know most entrepreneurs will agree with me that you first find what is necessity is the mother of invention, and lead with purpose.
Right. Karen, did you have any anything that you want to leave people with?
Yes. I think for me, what I'd say is that in Africa, we are still grappling with many challenges, from youth unemployment, food insecurity, access to education and healthcare. So for me, I would say these are the places where shared value will succeed most. So for me, is in the past, would look at this as threats to profit. But now we get an opportunity and a model that gives us a chance going forward to make that mindset shift that we need into looking at Africa's problems as African opportunities. These are the opportunity baskets that we all need to tap into and innovate around and create shared models around. And just joining into the Africa Free Trade Area, imagine if different African youth or different entrepreneurs were tackling this, and as Africans would look into South Africa, Nigeria, wherever, and borrow with pride some of these things, copy with pride and implement them at home and scale. We would never see this as problems. There'd be opportunities. So shared value model does give us an opportunity to create new revenue streams and at the same time impact on the societies in which we operate in. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Karen. And it's too bad that we don't have more time to sort of discuss this because, you know, Barbara touched on shared value sort of being at the heart of, you know, she mentioned Ubuntu and how Africans are at heart, but we haven't gotten into, you know, outside companies coming onto the continent and doing business. And a lot of times there's no shared value that's involved. You know, you have to care about your community in order to contribute to your community. So what are we doing in that regard? How are we holding them responsible for where we are? But as I said, the time is going, so let's go ahead and continue on with our closings. Kanye and Barbara, final thoughts. Let's go ahead and start with Kanye. What would you like everyone to leave here with today?
You know, McKenna, just at the back of what we've just said, how do we hold those coming outside accountable is to show up as Africans with pride and also with professionalism, with knowledge, and with that kind of energy. And I think Beatrice put it very well in the last panel when she said, women are out there, they are ready. They are not coming cap in hand. They are not begging. They are already there. So shared value for me is a principle that says, bring yourself onto the table so that you are also taken seriously. It's not a case of because you are old that much, because you're a Black woman, because you are young. Show up and businesses also respond in the similar way, in the similar manner. We have to start asking ourselves different questions. What are we bringing to the party first before we ask people to give us what we think we deserve?
Right. So often we underestimate the power of just showing up and actually being what we want to see. Final thoughts, Barbara, what would you like everyone to leave here with today?
I cannot agree with Kanye more. With Gautrain and with public-private partnerships, what was absolutely great was that we didn't come as Africa with cap in hand. We went out and we said, we have money. Come and partner with us. And that's the key to success, I think, of any shared value project as well. Show up, as Kanye said. And I think what I would like to leave you with, and we had so many naysayers that said, Africa cannot pull off a project like Gautrain. There would be fraud. There would be mismanagement of funds. The bridges would collapse. It's 20 years into the planning, construction, and operation of Gautrain. None of that has happened. And I had in my office a little quote of, and I get emotional, the greatest man that walked the soil of Africa, Nelson Mandela. And he said, it always seems impossible until it is done. We can do this.
Absolutely.
And we have to do this.
Oh, what a perfect way to end the discussion. I just want to say thank you so much. I can see that our time is about up. So thank you so very much to all of our panelists. I really enjoyed and appreciated being here. Hopefully next time we can take the discussion even further, because I think we got quite a bit out of this discussion. And with that said, my name is Makeda Mahadio, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over.
Thank you, Makeda, and thank you to our panelists. I mean, we could have carried on talking, but we're running out of time and we're running a little bit late as well. So just one thing that I want to say about shared value is that it is about us creating economic value and value for society. So if we can remember that, that's the most important thing we need to do. But without any further ado, I want to now introduce Prof. Abel Kinoti he's the Dean of Riara School of Business and also hosting with us and with Lagos Business School today this forum. So Prof. Abel, if you're there, can you please unmute and put your video on? And it's over to you to give us a summary of the learnings of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiki, for welcoming me on board. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I trust that you'll all agree with the panelists, the discussants, that we've really learned a lot. And Tiki has really led us into understanding or delving further into understanding about how best we can take advantage of the shared value to deepen our understanding of the African continental free trade area. The session started with a keynote address on leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Agreement for Sustainable Development by Silva Ojako, Chief of Staff, African Continental Free Trade Area, who gave us an overview of the size of the body that we are talking about. With 1.3 billion people, population growth rate of 2.5 billion by 25 years from now, combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, with 65% of the population being young people, it really means we have what it requires to drive the Africa's recovery and the growth towards responsible business. Silva noted that SMEs contribute about 43% of the cross-border trade in Africa, and many of them are led by women and the youth. We also need a value chain to build on what we have, the minerals, the agriculture, and develop infrastructure if we have to take advantage of the African free continental area. The region gives us the opportunity to open up the regional value chains and trigger industrial development, employment creation, and enhance Africa's progress towards the SDGs. Africa has to remain united and focus on the realization of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement to propel the continent towards economic prosperity and to lift about 100 million people out of poverty, as noted by Silva Ojako. Africa can trade more and better with the rest of the world if it is able to develop its regional value chains through the trade agreement, and it can also improve the terms of trade of how Africa does business with the rest of the world. In conclusion, he noted that we have to look for ways of upskilling public sector participation in the whole process, in improving the production technologies, and also we really need to understand some of the key elements that are required in this particular given field. Now, in reaction, a panel on leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area that was led by Dr. Adun Nakupe, who is a faculty on sustainability and strategy in LBS, and panel members being Dr. Eve, Dr. John B., and Beatrice Gakuba. They painted the situation on the ground from different areas and discovered and told us that transparency is an important ingredient to enhance trust and effectiveness coordination among the participating countries. We also need to think about the standardizations. We do have different standards in different parts, and moving products from one area to another is a major problem. Eradication of non-tariff barriers is also a critical dimension, as noted by John B. If we are if we are needed to move on. There is also need for more engagements between governments and the private sector and to develop the national quality infrastructure that is required to do this. We need to look at different areas across sectors and find out which one is best suited for us to grow our economies. Pushing for business representations among the private people will be very important so that their voices can be heard and we speak from one voice. The issue of harassment of the traders across borders, particularly women, is something that ought to be addressed since they mainly deal with agricultural products, which is a key pillar, a key cornerstone for this particular given field, as noted by Beatrice Gakuba. There is also a need for a special window spearheaded towards supporting the Africa women in agribusiness, as Beatrice observed. Finally, the panel on strong institutions, SBD, shared value and responsible business, led by Makenda as the moderator, with Sasini, Kanye, and Karen from different institutions, ABSA, Motion Limited, Safaricom, and Gautrain. Noting that there is need for us to embrace this new concept of shared responsibility, shared value, which is slightly different from what we are referring to as social responsibility or social investments. There is need for all of us to start from the beginning in trying to understand how can we co-create from the word go at the genesis without necessarily bringing people on board at a later point. And this calls for key understanding with all the stakeholders, the customers, the society, the employees, all of them, they become part and parcel of navigating the whole process. There was a call for universities to be really play a key role, and I trust and believe we are up to the task and we will do our level best. So in conclusion, different perspectives on how businesses can be done and won't be done in this part of the world requires a shift in the paradigm of how the businesses are operating. And there is a wake-up call on the shared value perspective to be a guiding pillar on how best we can do it. And I think we'll definitely do it. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I do hope we keep this conversation moving on forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Abel, for that summary. And you're 100% right. I think that what needs to happen is that we need a new system because our old system didn't work. That's why we are where we are today from a COVID-19 perspective. So just as the organizers, we've got a very special request now, and we want to ask before we close, is if there's one of the attendees that wants to give us some feedback of their experience of today. You've got 1 minute. If you put your hand up, we will unmute your mic and we'll give you the floor. Is there anybody that's brave enough to join us? Oh,
We
there's
have Donald already.
Barker. Okay. Donald, can you hear us? Can you unmute?
Donald was first, yes.
You saw. Okay, Donald, sorry. Donald?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Donald.
Wow, thank you for having me. Quite an interesting conversation. I mean, listening to Barbara speak on shared values and, Makeda put the questions right. I was quite thrilled. Thank you. It's a very, very unique subject, even at this time, to my mind. And I just was thinking about something that, hey, these conversations are quite effective. They're quite potent. But I think that a good way to reflect and the good thing will be to demonstrate these discussions with the project. Get it out there and get it done. Do something for these people that are being spoken about and implement or execute these shared value principles in that thing that you do. Recently, I was talking to a group of farmers. We're working on a project. It's an agricultural project that just leverages on the cooperative system across people in the towns and villages. So we said, hey, because these are smallholder farmers, and Lagos Business School knows about this, the smallholder finance and investment network, SAFIN. You did a study where you said, hey, the best way to work with these smallholder farmers is to work with agro service providers who can come and coordinate them, because you can't be talking to 1 million people at the same time. Why not talk to 1 million people in 10 groups? And those groups have already been organized by these smallholder farmers, just naturally. They just grew up based on the structure and the system they operate in. It's one of harmony and cooperation. So they say, hey, if we're farming together, let's have a group that we can coordinate ourselves. And they're just, it's natural to them. So those are shared values. They have already exhibited shared values of a shared value of harmony, of peace, of cooperation, for progress. So when we come with these ideas of shared values and we're discussing, they have already provided for us platforms to implement these ideas that have been discussed. So the task usually is how you go through the whole process of engineering everybody to come together. They are together already. So how do we go straight to them and reach them? So I thought that, to conclude, there should be a project to just demonstrate these discussions. The outcome of this discussion today should be, hey, we want to demonstrate conclusions or agreements from these discussions on these projects. And then it can be used to reflect what it is we're all talking about. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. I think what you were talking about is what we're always looking for is those shared value case studies, because we've got to create our own narrative. And by creating our own narrative, we actually, get to tell the stories and create a better understanding that will empower those that are not familiar with it. I'm really sorry. We would love to give everybody an opportunity to speak.
Tiki, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Donald. I was busy talking to Donald about case studies, Donald, because we're always looking for case studies. Sorry, Prof. Chris. We're always looking for case studies because we've got to create our narrative and get the stories about successful shared value, initiatives out there. And we would have loved to get all of these other questions or hands raised, give them an opportunity, but we're out of time. So last but not least, probably for me, one of the most important people, Prof. Chris Ogbechi, convener of the Africa Responsible Business Forum and the Dean of the Lagos Business School. Thank you so much for making the time, and thank you for speaking to us and giving us a bit of a call to action and the way forward. Thank you, Prof. Chris. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. You'll agree with me that the last 2 days have been exciting and enlightening for most of us. So I can say it's been a time well spent. I would like to say a big thank you to all our partners, speakers, and participants for making the Third Africa Responsible Business Forum a worthwhile engagement. It's been a wonderful learning and engagement platform over these 2 days, and I'm so glad to be part of it. For everything we have discussed, private sector responsibility in financing Africa's sustainable recovery, why is gender parity important in the workplace, leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Agreement for sustainable development, strong institutions, SDGs, shared value, and responsible business. we'll all agree that business has a responsibility in building the Africa we want. Nobody's going to do it for us. African businesses have to do it. The Africa that meets the needs of the present, but does not take away the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. An African adage, remember, says that we do not inherit the earth, we inherit from our ancestors, but we actually borrow it from our children. If you inherit something, you destroy it. If you borrow it, you keep it and pay it back to whoever gave it to you. Our esteemed speakers have done an amazing job distilling the ideas, analyzing the issues, and profiling the solutions. I hope we all take these lessons back to organizations, institutions, families, and communities. We can make a difference through our businesses and spheres of influence. The time to act is now. And COVID has given us a wonderful opportunity to do that, because COVID has also demonstrated that business and society go hand in hand. And COVID has also demonstrated the need for businesses to think of society when they are actually putting together their strategies. I want us to get involved in the United Nations Global Compact. Join the Shared Value Africa Initiative. Engage the AFTAC secretariats. Collaborate and support academic institutions across the continent. But most importantly, contribute towards the actualization of the SDGs. We just have 10 years to go. And we still have a long way to get to the promised land. Lagos Business School and Lagos Business School Sustainability Center remain committed to driving sustainable development in Africa. Our mission is to develop responsible leaders for Africa and the world, and we are delighted to have hosted you. Finally, I want to thank the teams who have worked tirelessly to deliver the ARB Forum. Thank you to the team of the Lagos Business School Sustainability Center and the Shared Value Africa Initiative. We look forward to working with you again. And I look forward to seeing all of you next year at the 4th Africa Responsible Business Forum, where we'll be looking at another topical issue that affects the life of Africans and the continuity of our businesses. Please stay safe as COVID is real, and bye for now. Thank you very much. Over to you, Reva.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Prof. We'll see you all next time. Please subscribe to our mailing list, download our annual report, stay in touch so that we keep educating and disseminating and keep creating a better Africa. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tiki.
Thank you, Reba, and let's go and build the Africa we want. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Prof. And I just want to say thank you very much to the Lagos team. It's been a real great experience working with you. So thank you all and be safe.
Bye-bye.
What is creating shared value all about? CSV is short for Creating Shared Value. It is a powerful business management concept that can promote companies to think differently about their approach to social and environmental issues. It is a strategy for addressing society's challenges through profitable business models. It's all about policies and practices that enhance the competitiveness of companies while improving social and environmental conditions in the regions in which they operate. CSV is not CSR. creating shared value goes beyond philanthropy or corporate social responsibility. Shared value is not about personal values. It's not about sharing the value already created by firms. It is not CSI. It is not philanthropy or corporate social responsibility. Because in these cases, an organization's social contributions are not necessarily intrinsic to the bottom line. The concept of shared value recognizes that societal needs, not just conventional economic needs, define markets. It is also an important tool to align any business to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The social challenges identified by the goals provide a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. When businesses act as businesses, not as charitable donors, they can improve profitability while also improving key measures of societal well-being, environmental performance, public health and nutrition, affordable housing and financial security. Ultimately, it's all about weaving social need into the very fabric of business and creating both economic and societal value. Shared value is the most powerful practice that any company can use to achieve its purpose at scale. It increases company competitiveness and profitability by solving social problems. It helps to drive innovation by seeking opportunities for both business and society. And ultimately, it helps to create a sustainable future.
You come to Lagos Business School, you join the community that's made up of not only the staff and employees of Lagos Business School, but everybody who has participated in any program at the Lagos Business School. Our mission is to develop responsible managers for Africa and the world at large. And indeed, the first Chief Executive Program participants of Lagos Business School coined the term the Oasis of Sanity to describe Lagos Business School. And therefore, as part of the community of Lagos Business School, we expect that every member of that community will be focused and committed to ensuring that we develop professional managers for Africa and also that we influence society. And how do we go about influencing society? By all the things that I hope that you have learned or that have been strengthened by your time at Lagos Business School. When you attend any of the programs at Lagos Business School, we make bold to say that in terms of the content, you will get the same as you get in any world-class business school in the world. And we make that promise because we have attained international accreditations from the two topmost accrediting bodies in the world. And we will only get that accreditation if they believe that the quality that we offer is the same as offered in top business schools of the world. But where we're different is that we talk about the peculiarities of doing business in Nigeria and Africa.
The CEO Roundtable was started a few years ago. We use this as an opportunity to bring CEOs together to focus on just one issue every time that is of importance to them that will affect business in the long term. This year we decided to focus on plastic waste management because this is becoming a global issue and also a national issue. And since we have many companies that use plastic as container of material across all aspects of our lives, we felt that this is a good start for CEOs to say how can they be called to action.
In being part of the Lagos Business School discussion today,
We think every effort that enables us to talk about this crisis is a good thing. We came to join this because we think there is a problem, and as a leading company, we can contribute to the conversation and the solution.
One of the prime reasons for us as a government is to reduce how much we spend on waste management. We want people to sort at source. And of course, we want to ensure more responsible management of the environment for future generations. That's a prime, some of us are already, knocking 50, 60, but for our children, for the sake of our children, we have to start now, no matter how difficult it may appear. And of course, we believe very strongly that it's going to create a lot of jobs.
I was actually very, very impressed and excited to see the level of stakeholders that were at the CEO Roundtable. The mitigation of plastic pollution in Nigeria is a huge problem. I mean, the statistics that were mentioned today, we're talking about, billions of PET bottles are produced as just one of the waste streams, right? And we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that, this plastic waste don't end up in our gutters and at the ocean and don't get ingested by our animals. And the only way to do it is for all the stakeholders to come together and work towards a solution. I'm super excited about the fact that we had some of the multinationals in the room and the fact that Lagos Business School is actually championing from a business perspective or business angle what the value chain would look like is very exciting.
All of us sitting together and having conversations and looking at the opportunities, that was our objective and it was achieved today.
Well, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome you to the International Sustainability Conference.
Today, I was asked to come and share what the company is doing in the space of sustainability when it comes to plastic, recycling, and so forth. The goal was to highlight three things. So number one, we have to consider the waste that's already currently in our environment. Number two was sharing the company's circularity strategy about how we envision the waste come in the future. And number three, how we partner with others.
But we all know that SME is the bedrock of the economy. So if we don't have sustainable and affordable electricity for even the SMEs, we will have huge energy poverty in the country.
Sustainability is the way forward, and that's the way to really protect our planet from the projected catastrophic effect of the climate and the planet.
It's been an interesting conference because the topic innovation is something that most people, we talk about it, but we don't actually know what it means for many people. But to come to a conference whereby the practicalities of innovation in sustainability are really addressed by professionals in their field with very clear examples, it's actually quite important.
In the panel I chaired, when we talked about creating sustainable business model to combat and end poverty, absolutely is a way to go. Because a lot of business models have been tested in the market and they're working. So the next thing is, how do we then scale? That's the way I see us tackling poverty in Nigeria and to position Nigeria as one of the leading African countries. The whole idea was see how companies who are operating there can focus on the bottom of the pyramid, but actually realizing that by practicing sustainability effectively in that sector, they can still grow the business and make money.
The conference is really an opportunity for people involved in sustainability across the spectrum to come together, to network, to pick up new ideas of how to drive sustainability in our world today.
Thank you very much for honoring us with your presence. We're very grateful to the partner for this forum, Dow Chemicals, for supporting LBS Sustainability Center, to all our speakers and panelists for joining us today, even traveling from far distances. We're very grateful to you.